Hello, everyone. Very good evening, and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep. Welcome to another session on international relations. Before we begin, a couple of important announcements. Today, after the class at 8:30 p.m., Sarmad sir will take a special session regarding the recordings that are available to you. As you know, the recordings will be available only for 7 days starting from this week. So we have a doubt clearing session at 8:30 p.m. So please attend the session immediately after this class. Next, the second announcement is that last week you guys had, in the morning you had economy and in the evening you had geography classes. So we had a separate doubt clearing session that had been announced. So that session will happen this Saturday. Is that clear? So Saturday morning at 6 a.m. we'll have a doubt clearing session for economy by Sham sir. And in the evening, we'll have a doubt clearing session at 5 p.m. for geography by Mukesh sir. So whatever doubts you have in economy and geography, please send those doubts to IAS Live. You have that email ID, IAS Live. So send all your doubts from economy and geography to this particular ID and attend the session this Saturday, the coming Saturday. I hope this is clear. So let's begin with today's discussion. Yesterday, we had started with India's relations with Bangladesh. We spoke about the key location of Bangladesh and we understood why Bangladesh is significant for India. We were discussing the background, the history, and we were talking about India's role in the liberation of Bangladesh. So we spoke about how in East Pakistan the Bengalis were oppressed and discriminated and targeted by the Pakistani state, especially by the Punjabi elite, right? They would systematically discriminate and oppress the Bengalis, triggering resentment, which eventually led to the start of a liberation movement in East Pakistan. So as Pakistani army started committing atrocities and unleashed massive violence, it turned into a widespread pro-independence movement, which included an armed rebellion as well. So, in these developments in Pakistan, that is particularly in East Pakistan, India would play a direct role. I explained how then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi authorized a covert operation in Bangladesh, that is in East Pakistan, to support the Bengali liberation movement. Through India's intelligence agency, that is RAW, Research and Analysis Wing, India would start supplying weapons, funds, and provide training to the Mukti Bahini rebels who would offer armed resistance against the Pakistani army. India would shelter the Bengali refugees who had come to the country in large numbers. Across the border states, around 10 million refugees were accommodated by India. And we worked with some of these refugees and liberation fighters, gave them the required support. We supported the Mukti Bahini armed rebellion movement. We supported Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and the Awami League in its fight for independence. We gave political support to Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's movement known as Shanti Bahini. Just like Mukti Bahini was leading the armed rebellion, then on the other hand, Awami League and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, they were leading the Shanti Bahini, leading the political phase of the struggle. So India would support both the political phase of the struggle and as well as provide secret support to the armed rebellion led by Mukti Bahini. This was India's secret war in Pakistan. This was India's direct role, direct intervention in the crisis in East Pakistan to support the Bengalis and to liberate East Pakistan and break it apart to create Bangladesh. The Indira Gandhi government saw this as a humanitarian duty, as a moral obligation to protect the Bengalis. This was also a strategic opportunity for India to exploit Pakistan's internal divide and to break the country into two parts. So, this involvement of India, which is largely unacknowledged, right? That's how covert operations are. Covert wars are never acknowledged, they are not supposed to be acknowledged. So, this marks India's covert intervention in East Pakistan, where we gave direct support to the liberation movement. Then, the other phase of Indian involvement, we were discussing about the 1971 war. where India fought a overt war with Pakistan, which eventually achieved the liberation of Bangladesh. Both the phases of the war were equally important. The covert war led by RAW with support to Mukti Bahini had weakened Pakistan, and eventually the overt war that broke out in December 1971. This would be a full-fledged war between India and Pakistan. In December 1971, almost 9 months after Operation Searchlight, India was forced to carry out a direct military intervention as Pakistan attacked India for the covert support that India was providing to the liberation movement. See, obviously, Pakistan was not dumb. Pakistan realized what was happening. For several months, RAW was backing Mukti Bahini. India was directly involved in this covert war, which was weakening Pakistan. Because Mukti Bahini would carry out major attacks in East Pakistan, targeting the Pakistani army and the state. So, as the scale of violence increased, Pakistan quickly realized India's involvement. So, Pakistan would eventually retaliate against India to break this covert support that we were giving to Bengali rebels. And as Pakistan attacked India, it pushed India to war against Pakistan. By then, the Indian forces were preparing for such a conflict. The Indian Army, the Indian Navy, the Indian Air Force, they were all preparing for such a conflict from several months, as Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had anticipated a likely retaliation by Pakistan. It was very much expected that Pakistan will retaliate. Pakistan might launch an attack. See, here India didn't want to trigger the conflict. We didn't want to be seen as the aggressor, because then it would have been difficult to get the global support in India's favor. It was very crucial to maintain the right posture for India. While secret covert support was sustainable, a direct attack by India would have been criticized by other countries. Other countries would have seen that India is just an exploitative country, an opportunistic country exploiting the internal issues of Pakistan. So India could not launch an overt attack on its own. That would be an instigation from the Indian side. So at any cost, India had decided to avoid this, which means India would not go to war unless Pakistan triggered the conflict. So the Indian forces were put on standby on the highest alert, and from several months, the Indian forces were preparing. The Indian Army, especially under the able leadership of Sam Manekshaw, and also the Navy and the Air Force. They were preparing for an eventual conflict because the crisis was escalating day by day. The refugee flow kept on increasing. The attacks against Bengalis kept increasing in East Pakistan. The covert war led by India was also scaled up, causing more destabilization in the region. So as tensions were increasing, India expected that Pakistan will retaliate, and that was the opportunity that Indira Gandhi government was waiting for. Because if India had triggered the overt war, then India would have been blamed for the conflict. Other countries, they would have refused to back India. They would have criticized India for exploiting the opportunity. So this global posturing was extremely critical. It was crucial for India to get the right support and create the right image, because Western countries, particularly the United States, were largely pro-Pakistan during this period, during the Cold War period. This is another important phase of the conflict that you should understand. India fought this war under very, very difficult circumstances. We were not only dealing with a refugee crisis and supporting the liberation movement, we were also dealing with a diplomatic challenge. Because Western countries, primarily the United States, was completely aligned with Pakistan, and US especially had even adopted a hostile position against India during the Cold War. This was the Cold War period. The Cold War was at its peak between United States and the Soviet Union. So the world was divided between these two power blocks, and Pakistan had clearly aligned with the US. Pakistan had become very critical for the US as it was helping the US establish ties with China. For the US government in 1971, it was a top diplomatic priority to set up ties with China, and Pakistan was the mediator. Is that clear? You need to look at the global context of this conflict, not just at the regional context. As India was preparing for the conflict and aiding the liberation movement, it was very important for India to create the right image and get the global support. Because, as I told you yesterday, when Pakistan started these atrocities, India appealed to other countries. We presented evidence to show what Pakistan was doing. But these foreign countries, many of them, the big powers, the Western countries, they kept ignoring what Pakistan was doing. Right? They were conveniently ignoring the genocide that Pakistan was committing. Because in this Cold War taking place at the global level, Pakistan had aligned with the West. From 1950s and 60s itself, Pakistan had joined few military clubs that included few West European countries that were aligned with the US. So Pakistan was already a part of the military alliances that included Western countries. And Pakistan became a key mediator for the US to set up ties with China, which was a top diplomatic priority for the US government. At this crucial point, the US was headed by President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was the president, and his national security advisor was Henry Kissinger. The Nixon-Kissinger combination was deadly for India because both these top leaders, they were outright racists. They outright held a racial bias and hatred against India, whereas they favored Pakistan and its military dictatorship as it was helping them set up ties with China. See, during the Cold War, the US was trying to pull China away from Soviet influence. When China had annexed Tibet in 1950 and committed atrocities against Tibetan Buddhists, US had cut off ties with China. It didn't have official ties with the People's Republic of China. So Nixon and Kissinger had made it a priority for themselves to establish ties with China. This was their biggest priority, so that they could pull China away from Soviet influence. And also they saw the size of the Chinese market. China was on the verge of introducing economic reforms, and they saw that US can leverage the opportunity, the economic opportunity in China. So in 1970-71, for the US, it was a very big priority to re-establish ties with China. And Pakistan was critical for this relationship as it was mediating between the US leadership and the Chinese leadership. As Pakistan was close to Nixon and Kissinger, it was also close to the Communist Party in China. Pakistan was acting as a mediator, thus becoming very critical for the US government. Along with this, Nixon and Kissinger held a racial bias and hatred against India. This is very well established through declassified documents of the White House. Recently, almost 40-50 years after this development, some of the White House documents were declassified. If you take a look at these documents and if you see what Nixon and Kissinger used to speak about India and Indira Gandhi, you will be shocked. You will be surprised. They would abuse Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. They would openly abuse India and Indians, which establishes their racial bias and hatred as well at that point in time. That explains their hostile approach towards India. So they wouldn't take India's advice into consideration. Rather, they would fully back Pakistan and allow Pakistan to do what it wanted. So at a time when US was acting hostile to India and when Pakistan had American support, it was critical for India to build global support, at least from other countries. Is that clear? So creating the right image was crucial. So that is why India could not be seen as the instigator. India couldn't launch the attack, and there was no justification for that, right? If India attacked Pakistan in the name of supporting the Bengali liberation movement, we wouldn't have gained global support. So strategically, India waited for the right opportunity, and the opportunity came up in December 1971 when Pakistan retaliated against India. Because Pakistan was under pressure. Our covert war had put tremendous pressure on Pakistan. Pakistan was on the brink of losing East Pakistan from its control. So at this critical point, Pakistan attacked India. Pakistani Air Force launched airstrikes in western parts of India towards Rajasthan and Punjab sector, thus triggering war with India, and immediately Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared war against Pakistan. This was the conflict the Indian forces were preparing for. This was one of the first conflicts where all the three services played a critical role. Because the first two wars with Pakistan were largely led and dominated by the Indian Army. The Navy and Air Force played a very minimal role in 1947 and 1965. But in 1971, all the three armed forces played a critical role and ensured a crushing defeat was delivered to Pakistan. Within 2 weeks, this war was over. The war began in the first week of December, and the war ended by 16th December. In just a matter of 2 weeks, India delivered a crushing defeat to Pakistan and ended the conflict. And thus played a direct role in the liberation of Bangladesh. Is that clear? It was a all-round victory for India. The Indian Air Force delivered significant damage to Pakistani Air Force and its assets, both in West and East Pakistan. The Indian Navy played a critical role. It blockaded the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal to prevent Pakistani Navy from sending reinforcements around India. Because India had closed its airspace as soon as the war began. Pakistani aircraft weren't allowed to pass over Indian airspace. Right? And only way Pakistan could send reinforcements and supplies from West Pakistan to East Pakistan was through the sea route, that is across the Indian subcontinent, around the Indian subcontinent. So the Indian Navy effectively blockaded the naval route, the sea route, and Indian Navy destroyed the Karachi port, the Karachi naval base, in a legendary operation. That's why the 4th of December is marked as Navy Day, even today. It was on this day that multiple Pakistani vessels were sunk near Karachi, and a major naval base at Karachi was almost destroyed by the Indian Navy. This happens to be one of the most legendary sea-based operations of India. So as Pakistani Navy was crushed, right, its submarine fleet, naval fleet, they all took a major hit. Its Air Force took a major hit, and the Indian Army made deep inroads into Pakistani territory. A complete land invasion was carried out into East Pakistan. Right? The Indian Army would take the help of Mukti Bahini rebels. They would back the Indian forces, and a full-fledged ground invasion was carried out, and within 2 weeks, the Indian Army captured East Pakistan entirely. It was a crushing defeat, and in fact, Pakistan would officially surrender at the end of the conflict. Now, this is a rare achievement. Usually, wars do not end with such a conclusive result. Usually, wars are open-ended, they hit a stalemate, like the Russia-Ukraine war. The wars keep dragging, there is no clear winner in a conflict. Both sides keep taking a lot of damages, and there is no concrete results at the end of it. But this war in 1971 was different, thanks to India's planning, its preparedness, and coordination between various organs of the government. This was India's finest hour. It was India's finest diplomatic victory, military victory, and intelligence victory as well. Thanks to the armed forces, the intelligence agencies, Ministry of External Affairs, and all the key organs of the government, India ensured a clear-cut victory in this conflict. India's strategy, objectives were very clearly laid out. Right? Our objective was never to capture East Pakistan for ourselves. Our objective was not to occupy East Pakistan. Our objective was to help the Bengali liberation movement and liberate Bangladesh. That is exactly what India did. By ensuring a defeat, right? The Pakistani commanders in East Pakistan, they officially signed the instrument of surrender. That's a very rare feat. Some of you might have seen this historical image where the Pakistani commander in East Pakistan is officially signing the instrument of surrender, accepting defeat in the war in front of the Indian commanders. Right? It's a very popular historic image that marked the end of the war, and essentially Pakistan had conceded defeat. India had fully liberated East Pakistan, and as promised, we retreated. We never occupied East Pakistan for ourselves. That was never the objective to begin with. If India had done that, we again would have lost global support, right? No one would have seen that India was acting to help Bengalis. They would have seen that India is trying to exploit the situation to capture territory. So as promised, India would retreat very quickly, and we ensured that Bangladesh was liberated and it was born as a new country under the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So this was India's direct role in liberating Bangladesh. We withstood tremendous global pressure. We ensured a crushing defeat to Pakistan, both through the covert war and the overt war, and eventually Bangladesh had been liberated. Now, let me tell you something regarding what the US was doing to support Pakistan in this conflict. As the US ignored Pakistan's atrocities, it even went on to threaten India during the war. The US issued an open threat to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. As part of the Cold War rivalry, the US had decided to back and support Pakistan in this conflict. The US, of course, knew about India's covert war, where India was aiding the liberation movement. So when the overt war was about to begin, right in the first week of December, when the initial clashes broke out between India and Pakistan, it is said that the US threatened India by dispatching the 7th Naval Fleet. The US Navy was ordered by Nixon and Kissinger to dispatch the 7th Naval Fleet, which consisted of an entire carrier battle group and was deployed into the Bay of Bengal to openly threaten India with consequences. This was the hostility of Nixon and Kissinger and the US government against India. India faced a direct threat, a military threat, that if India continued with the war and potentially liberated Bangladesh, the American threat was that the US would get involved and launch attacks against India to protect Pakistan. To prove the point, the 7th Naval Fleet of the US, which is stationed in the Indian Ocean, the US Navy has a major naval base. All right, I'll show you the naval base in a later class when we come to Indian Ocean. It's called Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a small island in the Indian Ocean near Maldives, which is a major American military base. So from here, an entire carrier battle group consisting of aircraft carriers, submarines, missile boats, frigates, corvettes, an entire fleet of naval ships, which are armed even with nuclear weapons, were dispatched into Bay of Bengal to issue an open threat to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. The threat was US will attack India if India does not cease the war. Is that clear? So this was a critical point, a turning point in this event. This is where India had to make a choice. As India was being threatened by the US consistently and we weren't getting global support because of the Western pressure, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had to make a difficult choice, which was to counter the American threat by seeking an alignment with the Soviets. Prior to this, India was committed to the non-aligned movement. Remember the non-aligned movement, which I mentioned in the first class? During this Cold War, from 1947 till 1971, India was firmly committed to the principles of non-alignment. We never chose between US and Soviet Union during this period from 1947 to 1971. We championed a third neutral path and we remained non-aligned until 1971. Right? India and few other countries, like-minded countries, they were championing this non-aligned path, and we hadn't chosen sides either with US or Soviet power blocs. But now that US had become openly hostile, it was backing Pakistan, ignoring its atrocities, and it even went to the extent of issuing a direct military threat by deploying its naval forces into Bay of Bengal, right? That became the breaking point for India. So this is where Prime Minister Indira Gandhi would make a critical decision. It is often seen as a diplomatic masterstroke by the Prime Minister as India abandoned non-alignment. India gave up its non-aligned approach and sought a close relationship with Soviets to counter the US threat. This led to the signing of the historic 1971 Treaty of Peace and Friendship between India and Soviet Union. So as a result of this treaty, India and Soviet Union became military allies. Soviet Union guaranteed military support if necessary to defend India and protect India. Essentially, through the treaty, the Soviets guaranteed India's defense against external threats, which was a reference to the military threat issued by the US. There are several accounts which say that as the 7th Naval Fleet of US was passing through Indian Ocean and Bay of Bengal, this naval fleet was being trailed by Soviet fleet as well. Soviet Union had already engaged in the region. Soviet Navy, including its nuclear-armed submarines, were reportedly trailing and tracking the American naval fleet as the US deployed its naval forces into Bay of Bengal. So that is the kind of military support Soviet Union extended. Essentially, Soviet Union guaranteed India's security. So as the Soviet Union gave the military support, the US backed off. Right? US wouldn't risk a potential nuclear war with Soviet Union. Because just few years before this, in 1960s, US and Soviet Union had already come close to the brink of a nuclear conflict during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Already nuclear tensions between US and Soviet Union were extremely high during the Cold War. So as the Soviet forces backed India and India signed this historic treaty, right? The US wouldn't risk further escalation of the conflict and the US backed out, which gave India the free hand. It allowed India to proceed with the war and break Pakistan into two parts. So this is what transformed India-Soviet relations as well. Until then, Soviet Union was just a good friend. But from here onward, Soviet Union became a strategic partner for India. India had essentially given up non-alignment and we had made a choice in the Cold War. As US had become hostile to India, threatening India, India aligned with Soviet Union and it marked the beginning of the strategic cooperation between the two sides. So Soviet Union not just guaranteed military support for India and the defense of India, later it would start supplying weapons, nuclear technology. It would support our space program. So that marked a new era in India-Soviet relations and it allowed India to continue the war and liberate Bangladesh. Is that clear? So our ties with US was very badly affected at this point. From 1971 until 2001. During this period, India-US had hostile relations. We did not trust each other. After this, there was a trust deficit. US had become opposed to Indian interests. Reportedly, it even tried to derail our nuclear and space program in the 70s and 80s. So throughout this period of 30 years, India-US were not good friends. Even though the people of two countries had good relations, governments at the government level also there was decent relationship. In strategic areas, India-US wouldn't trust each other and we had a hostile relationship with the United States. Right? Because in the Cold War, we had chosen a side, we had aligned with the Soviet Union, and it's a Soviet support which guaranteed India's victory against Pakistan. It was crucial to push back the American military threat. Is that clear? So this is how India secured a conclusive military victory. India achieved the unthinkable. India broke Pakistan. Pakistan officially surrendered, which became its most humiliating moment. Bangladesh was liberated. A new country was born because of India's help, because of India's covert war and overt war. So this was nothing short of a military victory, a diplomatic victory, and a victory for our intelligence agencies as well. Is that clear? It was one of the finest military, diplomatic, and intelligence victories for India. A conclusive defeat for Pakistan, official surrender by signing the instrument of surrender. Bangladesh would be liberated, a new country was created by India, and all our objectives were met. The objectives that India had laid out, all the objectives were achieved despite the American pressure and the American threat. So this war was brought to an end in 1972 by signing the Shimla Accord, also called the Shimla Agreement. The Shimla Accord, or the Shimla Agreement, was signed in 1972, which officially brought the war to an end and marked the liberation of Bangladesh. So please be familiar with this history. The events in East Pakistan, what happened with Bengalis, the atrocities Pakistan committed, what pushed India to get involved, what was the kind of support we gave, and what was the global context in which we fought this war during the Cold War period. What was the involvement of the US and Soviet Union in this conflict? This was not an ordinary regional conflict between India and Pakistan. There was a global context to it, right? As US backed Pakistan, Soviet Union backed India. Two nuclear powers were directly involved, which easily could have escalated further, and potentially it could have escalated into a much bigger conflict, right? But as US retreated, India would defeat Pakistan and liberate Bangladesh, and we would negotiate a settlement and end the war in 1972 through the Shimla Agreement. Is that clear? So please remember the sequence of events. It could be relevant for the exam. The Shimla Accord or Shimla Agreement. Now, understanding the provisions of the agreement is also equally important. The Shimla Agreement itself is a very big topic, very important topic, especially with regard to India-Pakistan relations. So before we continue with Bangladesh, let us complete the Shimla Agreement. Let's understand the key provisions of this agreement, and then we will come back to the discussion on Bangladesh. So under the Shimla Agreement, the war was officially brought to an end. Is that clear? And Pakistan, which had surrendered almost 95,000 POWs, had been held under Indian custody. POW stands for prisoners of war. That is, enemy soldiers who are captured during war. They are called POWs, prisoners of war. So when the war ended and when Pakistan surrendered, India had captured 95,000 Pakistani soldiers. There were close to 95,000 POWs in Indian custody. This was a tremendous leverage for India. By using this leverage, we pushed Pakistan at the Shimla Agreement to end the war officially and recognize Bangladesh as a new independent country. Pakistan had no other choice. Because it had been conclusively defeated, it signed the instrument of surrender, and to secure the release of 95,000 soldiers, it had to agree to this Indian condition. The Indian condition was the war comes to an end officially, all right, and Bangladesh will be officially recognized by Pakistan, and in return, India will release all the POWs held in custody. It was a humanitarian gesture as well, We treated the POWs with great respect under international law, as per international conventions. Right? We upheld the Geneva Conventions. We didn't torture the soldiers or violate their dignity. We didn't break basic humanitarian principles. Right? India has always been that responsible country. We protected the POWs as per international rules and conventions, and with their dignity and basic rights intact, we returned them back to Pakistan. India released all the POWs as Pakistan agreed to recognize Bangladesh. That was India's immediate objective, to help the Bengalis to liberate the region, break Pakistan, and create Bangladesh. So the objective was officially achieved when Pakistan agreed to recognize Bangladesh, and as a gesture, we released all the POWs in return. Apart from these changes, India got few more promises. We extracted few more commitments from Pakistan. We renamed the ceasefire line as the line of control, or LOC, in Jammu and Kashmir. Let me explain the significance of this. The ceasefire line was the temporary de facto border in Kashmir between India and Pakistan. Is that clear? See, in 1947, what did Pakistan do? It tried to capture Kashmir for itself. It attacked the then princely state, which was under Raja Hari Singh. Right? At one point, J&K was independent. It was neither part of India nor a part of Pakistan. So Pakistan tried to capture Kashmir for itself in 1947. And later, Raja Hari Singh acceded and signed the instrument of accession, thus merging J&K into India. J&K, as it existed, became an integral part of the Indian Union. Then India went to war in 1947 to protect Jammu and Kashmir and liberate the occupied areas. So Indian troops in 1947 had retaken some of the occupied areas. We pushed back the Pakistani troops. But India took the matter to the United Nations, hoping for a fair settlement from the UN. Because India was in no position to continue the war at that point. Right? India had just become independent. We were struggling with many other problems and challenges. There was massive poverty. There were famines in the country. Right? There were many princely states and many regions which were not ready to join India. They were trying to break apart from India. For example, Naga insurgency had broken out in Northeast. Several princely states like Hyderabad, Junagadh, then few in Madhya Pradesh, right? Some princely states such as Indore, Bhopal, then Kingdom of Travancore. Several kingdoms like these were hesitant to join India. So as the government was struggling with creating a strong Indian Union and dealing with all the economic and social challenges, India was in no position to prolong the conflict, right? Our military resources were limited, and fighting a war in Jammu and Kashmir was not easy at that point, given the terrain, the weather, right? India did push back the Pakistani forces, retook some of the captured areas, but India placed faith in the UN, hoping that UN would provide a fair settlement. So India took the matter to the UN, calling for a ceasefire. We halted the war temporarily, called for a ceasefire, and with UN's intervention, a temporary ceasefire was agreed, which became part of the 1949 Karachi Agreement. Under the 1949 Karachi Agreement, this de facto line where Indian and Pakistani troops held positions in Kashmir, that became known as the ceasefire line, which would be the temporary border. Until the Kashmir issue was resolved, right, UN said that this line where Indian and Pakistani troops have held, that would become the temporary de facto border. So the line was called ceasefire line, which was recognized under the Karachi Agreement of 1949. And the UN gave itself a role to monitor the ceasefire, to monitor the ceasefire, that is, to ensure both India and Pakistan will not open fire and trigger wars and conflicts, the UN gave itself a role and appointed a UN military observer group both in India and Pakistan to ensure that both the countries will uphold the ceasefire. Now, India was not happy with any of these developments. See, initially, India hoped that UN, which was a newly created body, its primary purpose was to resolve such conflicts. That's why UN was established after Second World War. So, as a responsible country, India took the matter to the UN because even we didn't want a prolongation of this conflict. We didn't want to prolong this conflict with Pakistan. It would drain our resources and distract us from our path. So then India would realize that we made a mistake, a blunder had been committed because the UN was not acting fair. The UN had already been politicized. The big powers were playing geopolitics by using UN as a platform. Especially UK was showing a bias towards Pakistan. And India felt that we wouldn't get a fair solution with UN's involvement. Is that clear? By the time India realized it, it was already too late because we had referred the matter to the UN and UN had cemented the ceasefire line through Karachi Agreement, and it gave itself a role to monitor the ceasefire, and it appointed a military observer group both in India and Pakistan. In Jammu and Kashmir and on the other side in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. In both the places, UN set up a military observer group to monitor that both sides will uphold the ceasefire and to maintain the ceasefire line. So from 1947 to 1971, this was the temporary border between India and Pakistan. All right, the temporary positions that we had held after the 1947 war, that was the de facto border called the ceasefire line. Now, India was never happy with this. From the beginning, we knew that India was not being treated fair, right? India, Pakistan they were put on the same line, especially UK. It never recognized Pakistan was the instigator of the Kashmir conflict, not India. India simply defended Kashmir, right? So ideally, India should have got a better treatment, whereas the UN, because of United Kingdom's intervention, they treated India, Pakistan as the same, both as aggressor countries. And the UN involved itself and a third party got involved in the Kashmir conflict. So India was never happy with this arrangement, but since it was an international commitment we had made, we had accepted the ceasefire line under the Karachi Agreement, and we had allowed UN to play a role in monitoring the ceasefire line. There were UN military observers stationed both in India and Pakistan. So India was waiting for an opportunity to remove this system. So 1971 presented that opportunity. What Prime Minister Indira Gandhi did was, by using the POWs as a leverage, we convinced Pakistan to rename the ceasefire line as line of control. Is that clear? Now, what will happen because of this? If ceasefire line is renamed as line of control or LOC, it will essentially eliminate UN's role in the Kashmir conflict. Is that clear? Initially, when India took the matter to UN, we hoped that a fair solution would be provided. But as UN was being misused to favor Pakistan and harm Indian interests, India was never comfortable with the ceasefire line and the role of the UN in the Kashmir conflict. Right? This was an opportunity. So we removed the ceasefire line itself through the Shimla Agreement. The Shimla Agreement renamed ceasefire line as line of control. It's the same position. The line on the ground didn't change. The temporary border is still the same. Even today, we call it LOC, the line of control. Right? This is the position Indian and Pakistani troops have held since 1947, since the end of the First War. Is that clear? That temporary de facto line was called ceasefire line under Karachi Agreement. So under Karachi Agreement, UN had given a role to monitor this ceasefire line. That's why the military observer group had been stationed. Now, what India did was a clever change of words. It was a technical change, a legal change. We invalidated Karachi Agreement and ceasefire line by renaming it. India, Pakistan, both are sovereign countries. If they both agree to a change, there's nothing that UN can do about it. So India, Pakistan agreed to rename the ceasefire line as LOC, as line of control, which means Karachi Agreement is invalidated, which means UN has no role to play in Kashmir. So this was the position India wanted, and we achieved this under the Shimla Agreement. So even today, there is a UN military observer group, but India does not allow UN to play any role because Pakistan itself has accepted that there is no ceasefire line. Right? If there is no ceasefire line, what will the military observer group monitor? What will the UN monitor? So the third party role was eliminated, and since then, India has maintained a consistent position that there will be no third party involvement in Kashmir. Essentially, the Kashmir issue became a bilateral issue, and Pakistan also accepted this under Shimla Agreement. That's why even now, if Pakistan takes the Kashmir issue to UN or any international organization, we point towards Shimla Agreement. We remind Pakistan of its commitment under Shimla Agreement. Because under Shimla Agreement, Pakistan itself had agreed that Kashmir is a bilateral issue to be resolved between India and Pakistan. Right? Pakistan agreed with India that there is no third party involvement in Kashmir issue, which means the UN role had been eliminated by renaming the ceasefire line as line of control. This was a very, very important change that was done through the Shimla Agreement. Is that clear? Next, another important concession that we extracted was that Pakistan promised to not interfere or target India, to not interfere with our internal affairs, to not interfere with India's internal matters, and to not target India through covert wars. Essentially, it was a Pakistani promise to not sponsor terrorism against India, to not use its soil to nurture terror groups against India and wage covert wars against India. This is one more reason why Shimla Agreement is important. Is that clear? Please remember these 4 points. You can expect a full question here, mains question. UPSC might ask you to examine the importance of Shimla Agreement that ended the war. The first important point is that the 1971 war came to an end officially. Pakistan agreed to recognize Bangladesh. Official recognition was given by Pakistan. It conceded that East Pakistan was not its territory. In return, India agreed to honor the commitments by releasing the POWs as a humanitarian gesture. And by using the POWs as a leverage, India made a big change. India got a very big change done to strengthen our position in Kashmir. We removed the role of the UN by renaming ceasefire line as line of control. That's when LOC was created. Right? The LOC that you have today, which is the temporary de facto border between India and Pakistan, it was called ceasefire line under Karachi Agreement. Right? UN had given itself a role to monitor that ceasefire line. Since India didn't like the UN's role, we wanted to remove the third party involvement. We got ceasefire line renamed, as both India and Pakistan agreed to call it line of control or LOC. So with this, UN's role was eliminated, and India and Pakistan agreed that Kashmir is a bilateral issue to be settled bilaterally between India and Pakistan. So it meant going forward, there will be no third party involved in Kashmir dispute. There will be no role for any power, no role for US or UK or China or the United Nations. No third country, no third organization will be involved in Kashmir dispute. This is a commitment Pakistan has made. Both countries agreed that we will settle the issue bilaterally through our own bilateral talks. And Pakistan also made a promise that it won't hurt India, it won't target India or interfere in India's internal matters and sponsor covert wars and terrorism against India. That's why even now the even now the Shimla Agreement is still relevant, still important. Because every time India meets Pakistan, India has an interaction with the Pakistani side. We remind them of their failed commitments. We remind that Pakistan made a promise not to interfere, not to sponsor terrorism, but still you guys are doing it. Right? We hold Pakistan accountable by showing the Shimla Agreement and the promise that was made by Pakistan. So please remember these 5 points. All the 5 are very, very important. All right? The war officially ended. Bangladesh was recognized by Pakistan officially. India returned the POWs. Ceasefire line in Kashmir was renamed as line of control, eliminating role of UN and third party involvement. And finally, Pakistan promised to not interfere in India's internal matters, to not target India or subvert India by waging war against India. Is that clear? So these were the key promises made by Pakistan. But as you can expect, it hasn't upheld all the commitments. So that's why India keeps reminding Pakistan that you guys had promised in 1971 to not wage a covert war, to not sponsor terrorism and subvert India. So every time there is a terror attack, every time India Pakistan have a dialogue, we remind the Pakistani side of their failed commitments under the Shimla Agreement. All right. So these 5 points make this topic very, very important. I expect a mains question to be asked here. So please make a note of these 5 points, revise them, and understand the significance of this accord. Is that clear? So this ends my detailed discussion of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan relations from 47 to 71. Now you have understood the role India played in creating Bangladesh, right? We understood the regional context of the conflict, what triggered the war, what was India's involvement, and we also understood the global context in which the war was fought during the Cold War period. Is that clear? So any doubts, any questions, please let me know. I'll take up some questions for a few minutes. And after that, we will continue with the next part of the discussion. We'll see what happened after 1971. We'll discuss how relations developed between India and Bangladesh after 1971. All right. So first, let's clear all the doubts and confusion. So as I expected, one of the most common question is, why didn't we capture Kashmir during this war? Why didn't we take Kashmir in return? Right? This is a common question I get. Now, I already gave an explanation. If you paid attention, you would have understood why it was never possible for India to retake Kashmir following this war. Let me repeat those points again. Many students suggest that we should have used the opportunity to attack POK as well and capture POK back. Many students say that we should have used Shimla Agreement and the 95,000 soldiers as a leverage to take POK back. Many experts also have the same viewpoint, right? There are many who criticize India's policy following the war. But let me tell you why these measures were not possible. It would have hurt India's interest to do that. Let me explain that again. I've already given the explanation, but if you guys haven't noticed, let me give the explanation again. See, to begin with, this war was never about Kashmir. Let me write it down as well. The 1971 war why India didn't take back POK? That is your question, right? It's a common question. I know that. It's a very expected question. If we had conclusively defeated Pakistan, if Pakistan had surrendered, why didn't we simply take back POK, right? Or if 95,000 soldiers were in our custody, why didn't we force Pakistan to give up POK? This is a common question we get. It's a common criticism as well. But let's see the reality, the ground reality. Let's see the thought process of the Indian government at that point in time. Point number one, this war was never about Kashmir. Kashmir had nothing to do with this conflict. The Kashmir issue is a completely separate issue. Please understand that. This war was about Bengali oppression. Now, you tell me what would have happened if India had, let's say, we had tried capturing East Pakistan for ourselves and used that as a leverage to take back POK. Or let's say, since we had a clear advantage, what if we had invaded the entire POK region and tried to capture POK through military methods? If India had made that attempt, first thing, the first outcome, we would have lost global support and global sympathy, which until then was in India's favor. Except for US and few European countries, most of the countries were supportive of India's position. This diplomatic support for India was critical in the war, right? If India had made a move on Kashmir, no country would have supported India. They would have seen India as an opportunistic power. Now, please understand why we carried out the intervention, why our intervention was justified. India's intervention was justified because we were largely acting on moral grounds, on the grounds of humanity, to help the Bengalis who were being targeted through a genocide. If India had exploited the situation to make a move on Kashmir, we would have lost global support and sympathy. It would have made us vulnerable to American pressure tactics. The next point, Indian forces also had a massive constraint. Don't forget that, right? In terms of resources, in terms of motivation, the Indian forces were drained already by fighting a 2-week war. It was a very intense conflict. Please understand, back then, our armed forces had a lot of limitations. We were still a very poor country, right? The war would have been expensive. We didn't have the right equipment, the right material needed as well to fight a war in Kashmir. The theaters are very different. If India had extended the war to POK, we would have suffered significant losses as well, because Pakistan wouldn't give up. Pakistan wasn't stupid enough to simply give up POK. It would have fought. The war would have dragged. The war would have continued. The war would have escalated. Please understand, Pakistan surrendered only in East Pakistan. If India had extended the conflict towards POK, Pakistan would have fought back. It would have extended the war, right? Our forces were already under tremendous pressure, right? This would have become a question of availability of resources, weapons, logistics, and motivation. Got it? And more importantly, the Soviet support was conditional. It's not that Soviet Union would simply keep supporting India. The Soviet intention was never to help India take back POK. That was not what the war was about. The war was about liberating Bangladesh. Soviet support was limited to liberating Bangladesh. If India had made any move regarding Kashmir, Soviet Union would have never risked a potential nuclear war for India with the US. Please understand the global consequences here, right? There would be tremendous global pressure from Soviet Union and other countries as well. They sympathized with India, gave support to India because we were fighting for a just cause, which was to liberate Bangladesh, help the Bengalis, right? Any other move would have shown India in bad light. We would have lost global support and sympathy. We would have subjected ourselves to more diplomatic pressure. Soviet support might have been withdrawn beyond a certain point. Soviets weren't stupid as well. They wouldn't have risked a potential nuclear war with the US for the sake of India or Pakistan, right? So Soviet support was limited to the liberation of Bangladesh, not to take back POK. Because any such move by India would have dragged the war, Pakistan would have continued the conflict, and our resources also would have been drained. Our forces would have been further constrained. So practically, it was impossible. There was no question ever of taking back POK in 1971. Please get this right. Is that clear? On the ground, this was the reality, the regional and global reality. Globally, there would have been tremendous pressure on India. Our very involvement would have been under question. See, even today, India is appreciated for liberating Bangladesh. That would have never happened if India had made a move on POK. If we had made a move on POK, the war would have dragged, further hurting our economy, further hurting the Indian forces, affecting our motivation as well, and causing a prolonged conflict and destabilization of the region. Plus, the loss of global support, particularly that of Soviet Union, would have subjected ourselves to more American pressure. So, given all these circumstances, the right call was made. The correct call was made. Our objective was what? When we got involved, our objective was just to help Bengalis to liberate the region, right? This war was never about Kashmir. Please get this point right. Is that clear? I hope this answers your question. Next, Santosh is asking, sir, as India knows that UN is biased and politicized, why India is still trying at UN against Pakistan regarding POK? No, we are not. We are not. India does not bring up Kashmir issue at the UN. Please understand this and get this right. India does not bring up the Kashmir issue at UN. It is Pakistan which does that. We bring up the issue of terrorism that is sponsored by Pakistan. We use UN to counter Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. We show that Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism. We never use the UN platform to discuss Kashmir issue. But India would never do that. It's impossible because India has made it clear in 1971 that there is no third-party involvement in Kashmir conflict. If we ever discuss Kashmir, it's because Pakistan is pushing it. It's trying to internationalize Kashmir issue, and it's Pakistan which brings it up at UN, and we just counter it. All right? So we never discuss Kashmir issue at the UN. It's not a third-party issue. We treat this as a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. Vaishna is asking, how did Pakistan become so influential after independence as to negotiate between US and China, which were two large powers? As I told you, after independence, Pakistan got very close to China, especially after the 1962 war. By 1962, China, Pakistan both had fought wars with India. It was natural for China and Pakistan to collaborate, to form a nexus against India. A strategic nexus came up between them, where China would start supplying funds, weapons, and start giving military diplomatic support to Pakistan. So China, Pakistan became very, very close in 1950s and 1960s. Parallelly, Pakistan aligned with the Western power bloc during the Cold War. It joined a few military alliances with UK and other European countries and essentially became an ally of the US. Is that clear? So strategically and with regard to military relations, Pakistan established very close ties with the Western countries, especially the US. So Pakistan was in a position to mediate between both US and China by using its contacts. So that is how Pakistan positioned itself as a mediator between US and China. Gurjeet is asking, if we have no control on LOC, then how in map whole Kashmir is shown as Indian territory? See, that is how you justify your claim, right? See, if you look at the Jammu and Kashmir map, right? The official map shows whole J&K to be a part of India. That is our official position, the correct position. Since we claim the occupied area as well, we have to show that area in our map. But the ground reality is something else. It's slightly different. From 1947, we don't have control over all the parts of Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, as Pakistan has captured them illegally, right? So beyond LOC, after LOC, those areas are not under Indian control. They've been captured by Pakistan illegally from 1947. But since we object to this illegal occupation, even today we claim the whole of J&K to belong to India, we have to show these areas as part of our map. That is why the government is very clear. You cannot publish the wrong map of India. At least within Indian jurisdiction, wrong maps cannot be tolerated. The correct map has to be used, which shows the whole part of J&K as part of Indian territory. That is how you substantiate, justify your claims, and ensure that the message reaches across the border, that we still claim the area, we are still willing to take back that area. To maintain that stand, to maintain that position, we have to show those occupied areas as Indian territory. and that is the correct position as well. Vaishna is asking, the 71 war ended within 2 weeks. Why is then Russia-Ukraine war still dragging? See, you can't compare the two. It's apples and oranges, right? A war in 1971, a war in 2023, they are entirely different. Circumstances are different. The terrain is different. The resources of the parties involved is different, right? Ukraine is a formidable military power, and it has got significant support from Western countries, which drags the war, right? So there are many different factors. It wouldn't be a right comparison to compare 1971 war with Russia-Ukraine war, right? The war ended quickly in 1971 because India's planning preparedness was better. India delivered a crushing defeat on all the fronts, right? Whereas Russia has largely, distracted itself by focusing on the entire border areas and by focusing on unrealistic objectives. Whereas India's objectives were very clear, that was to liberate Bangladesh, right? So the time, the context, the terrain, everything is different. So I don't think it's a right comparison to, make a direct parallel between these two conflicts. Pradeep is asking, is there any procedure going on to take POK back? No, nothing as such. See, please understand, taking back POK means going to war with Pakistan. There's no other option as of now. Is that clear? If India has to take back POK, the only option is to go to war. And no Indian government is foolish enough to risk a conflict with Pakistan. Pakistan is a formidable military power. It's a nuclear power, right? POK is an issue to be settled in the future, right? You may not find a solution in the next few decades, maybe for many more years. Apart from the military option, there is no other way of taking POK back. Even if you go to war, there is no guarantee you will capture POK, right? Even India will suffer significant losses. The Russia-Ukraine war is an example for that. So, as of now, there is no consideration of taking POK back. The issue remains as it is, but we are open to negotiations. We are open to a negotiated settlement, right? But there is no progress on that front because neither Pakistan will give it up nor India will agree for any other settlement. And as Pakistan continues using terrorism as a weapon, there is no way Pakistan can have such a mature conversation. For many years, our relationship has been derailed. So there's no point in India engaging in talks with Pakistan on POK, right? And Pakistan also wouldn't agree to any such talks. So the only option that remains for India is the military option, which is again a impractical option. So as of now, the POK issue will remain as it is. Right now, our priority is to counter terrorism that Pakistan is sponsoring. So there's no process, no procedure as of now to take POK back. All right. So these are the questions. I hope you guys have understood all the key points that I have raised. We have discussed many issues. We have not just discussed India-Bangladesh relationship, we have discussed a part of India-Pakistan relationship as well. Is that clear? So now let's proceed with the next part. And let's understand how India-Bangladesh relations developed post 1971. Obviously, India was hoping for a friendly relationship with the new country. India had played a direct role, of course, in liberating Bangladesh. And as expected, the people of Bangladesh, the leaders, and the ruling party which came to power, the Awami League, they were all very grateful to India. They knew India's role and contribution. And as expected, very close friendly relations was established between India and Bangladesh. Is that clear? There were many standing issues, many pending issues. And immediately India-Bangladesh began efforts to resolve the pending issues. For example, the water sharing issue had never been resolved, especially the sharing of Ganga River, Ganga waters. We had a land boundary issue which had remained because Pakistan had never shown interest or a friendly attitude. Right? Pakistan was always derailing and obstructing our initiatives. So when Pakistan existed, none of these issues could be resolved. So since we got a friendly government in place, immediately India, Bangladesh got to work. All right? There was a sense of gratitude towards India from the people of Bangladesh. The government was very friendly. Awami League, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, they were all grateful to India for India's contribution. So friendly relations started, and some of the old pending issues were brought up and they were trying to resolve them. Initial treaties and agreements were signed to resolve the land boundary issue, to resolve the water sharing dispute. But unfortunately, we had a very big loss. We had a very big setback as Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated within few years. 1974, just a few years after independence, before India Bangladesh could achieve substantial progress, our biggest friend, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was assassinated by the Bangladeshi army. This was a military coup in Bangladesh. Is that clear? Within the Bangladeshi army, there were still many pro-Pakistan elements. Obviously, just because Bangladesh was born doesn't mean all the pro-Pakistan elements will go away, right? So within the new government, within the new army, there were several pro-Pakistan elements who were working for Pakistan and its intelligence agency, the ISI. Pakistan had sworn to target the Bangladeshi government and also target Indian interests because the defeat of 1971 was Pakistan's biggest humiliation. It was Pakistan's biggest defeat. Pakistan was embarrassed. It had committed to wage a covert war and derail Indian interests and target Bangladesh. So after repeated attempts, in fact, many assassination attempts were made to eliminate Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Every time India had saved his life, RAW was directly responsible to safeguard and protect Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and his family. But eventually, there was an uprising within the Bangladeshi army, some of the radical elements who were aligned with Pakistan. They assassinated Mujibur Rahman, his family, and several ministers. They threw out the Awami League government and captured power in mid-1970s. This was a complete U-turn, right? India lost all the advantage. With the throwout of Awami League and elimination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, India lost its closest friend. Bangladesh was taken over by the military, which was aligned with Pakistan, which was aligned with radical forces. Now, this was a nightmare for India. Everything that we had gained was lost and reset within few years. So this Bangladeshi government, after Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, became a hostile government that remained in power. It was a military dictatorship for almost 15 plus years. From 1974-75 till 1991, Bangladesh was under military rule, and this was a hostile government towards India. Indian interests were compromised during this period. After this, in 1991, democracy was restored, and a party known as BNP won the election, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. But BNP is also a right-wing party aligned with radical forces. It is a pro-Pakistan party. It's a pro-Pakistan party with close links with radical forces and extremist elements. So BNP also continued the hostile policy towards India. Basically, Bangladesh became hostile. India lost all the advantage, all the benefits we were supposed to gain. They were lost immediately, and the next 3 decades were a nightmare for India. From 1974 almost till 2009, India-Bangladesh relations were completely derailed. Is that clear? First, we had 15 plus years of military rule, military dictatorship, followed by the BNP government, which were all hostile towards India. In 1996, there was a small change when Awami League came back to power under Sheikh Hasina, the current Prime Minister. Sheikh Hasina is none other than the daughter of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So Sheikh Hasina is always grateful towards India, right? Because Sheikh Hasina knows the role of India in supporting the liberation movement. She also knows the role India has played in protecting her father and her family. In fact, after Mujibur Rahman's family was assassinated, Sheikh Hasina and few others who were left, they were protected by India for many more years. Sheikh Hasina largely grew up under Indian protection. Is that clear? She has spent a large part of her life in India under India's protection. So Sheikh Hasina has that great personal bond with India and with India's leadership. So under Sheikh Hasina, we got a friendly government for few years, and some small progress was made by signing the Ganga Water Sharing Treaty. But nothing concrete could be achieved because this Awami League government, it wasn't strong enough. It depended on outside support from other parties as well. So even though it was a positive development for India, it did not remain for long. We saw the return of BNP to power in 2001. So BNP again continued its hostile policy. So from 1974 till almost 2008, till this internal constitutional crisis, Bangladesh constantly remained against Indian interests. The only relief we got was for around 4 or 5 years from 96 to 2001 when Sheikh Hasina became the prime minister and brought back Awami League to power. Right? The only progress we saw was the signing of Ganga Water Sharing Treaty. Apart from that, there was no progress and our ties were very badly affected. Our major interests were compromised. In 2008, following an internal constitutional crisis, some changes took place internally in Bangladesh, which led to fresh elections. And then Sheikh Hasina came back with a full majority. She brought back Awami League to power and formed a strong government. And since then, she hasn't lost a single election. Since 2009 till now, almost 14 years, Sheikh Hasina has remained in power by winning consecutive elections. And this has been the turnaround. With Sheikh Hasina's election in 2009, the relations were completely transformed in favor of India. We have a friendly government in Bangladesh since 2009, thanks to Sheikh Hasina. So the last 14 years has seen a transformation of the relationship. All the concerns and problems we had have been addressed by Sheikh Hasina's government. That is why I told you Bangladesh is the most important neighbor. If we don't have good relations with Bangladesh, there are many problems and many challenges we face. At the same time, if we have good relations with Bangladesh, automatically our core concerns and interests are met. To understand this, you should know what kind of hostile relations we had from 1974 to 2009 under the military rule and also under the BNP government. You should know what kind of complex relations we had with Bangladesh. These governments were so hostile to India that they started harboring anti-India elements, particularly Northeast insurgents. Bangladesh became a safe haven for terrorist organizations. It became a terror sanctuary. It became a safe haven for insurgents and terrorists targeting India. And Pakistan's ISI had a direct role to play in this. Through its intelligence agency, the ISI, right? It was using Bangladeshi territory to support and shelter these insurgent groups and terror groups that would target India. The Bangladeshi government, its armed forces and intelligence agencies would align with the ISI. The Bangladeshi government, its army, and all the other security forces, they all aligned with Pakistan and they started giving state support to insurgency and terrorism against India. Is that clear? Several insurgent groups like NSC and ULFA, then Bodo outfits, they all took shelter in Bangladesh. They could easily secure weapons, funds, they found shelter, they could easily train by hiding across the border in Bangladesh. So the hostile governments here basically threatened the stability of Northeast India. They threatened the sovereignty of India by supporting these insurgent outfits. Several Pakistan sponsored terror organizations like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Huji, these terror groups, they found a base in Bangladesh to target India. Huji stands for Arkathul Jihad-e-Islami, a notorious terrorist outfit based out of Bangladesh, supported by Pakistan. And Lashkar-e-Toiba, these Pakistani-sponsored terror organizations, they found a support base in Bangladesh from there where they would target India. Huji, for example, has carried out many attacks in India by basing itself out of Bangladesh. It has sneaked terrorists across the border to carry out attacks in India. So terrorism and insurgency went up, creating major security problems for India that threatened our sovereignty. The hostile Bangladeshi governments would derail key Indian projects, including a gas pipeline that we had proposed with Myanmar. See, in Bay of Bengal, there are hydrocarbon reserves that are present. Right? It's a shared resource between India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. So India proposed a trilateral gas pipeline to benefit all three countries. It was a very big economic connectivity project, but Bangladesh derailed it because it was hostile to India. It was ruled by a hostile government under the military and under the BNP. Its proximity to Pakistan is what became the challenge, and these hostile governments never gave us transit access to Northeast region. Remember, yesterday I explained how Bangladesh can connect Northeast India with rest of India if it gives transit access. If it allows transit access, we can connect our roads, railway lines, and waterways to bypass the weakness at Siliguri corridor and provide better connectivity and better development to Northeast India. But this transit access was denied for 3 decades because of these hostile governments. The border security threats increased. Border security became a nightmare for India because of widespread prevalence of organized crime, illegal migration, and also due to pumping of fake Indian currency notes from across the border. The India-Bangladesh border became a security nightmare for India. It was not just terrorists and insurgents who would infiltrate and move across the region, right? Even illegal migrants started flowing into our country in large numbers. Illegal migration in itself became a major concern as it would cause demographic changes in Northeast India. It would create socio-ethnic problems resulting in riots and even contributed to the rise of Northeast insurgency in Assam and Tripura. All right, you don't worry. You'll understand more about this in internal security. In internal security, we have a separate chapter for Northeast insurgency. So there I'll explain in detail how illegal migration from Bangladesh and the presence of safe sanctuaries in Bangladesh and the security problems along this border has directly contributed to Northeast insurgency. For now, just understand that because of large-scale illegal migration in the Northeast region of India, in Assam, in Tripura, native tribes like Assamese and Tripuris, they resisted the entry of Bangladeshis. They were coming to India illegally in quite large numbers. They were trying to find better jobs and better livelihood in India. So when outsiders started entering the country and settling down in Assam and Tripura and other parts of the country, the locals, the native communities, they protested. It triggered widespread violence. It took a communal color as well, triggering communal tensions and social and ethnic tensions in Northeast India. Several insurgencies were born in Assam and Tripura to counter the illegal migration. So many such security threats came up because of Bangladesh, because of the hostile governments. All types of organized crime became prevalent: drugs trafficking, arms trafficking, human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, cattle smuggling. All these criminal activities flourished because of weak border security by the Bangladeshi forces. Pakistan used the route to push fake Indian currency notes into India to cause the economic destabilization of the country. So, the presence of drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms trafficking, wildlife trafficking, and cattle smuggling, these became the biggest border threats, along with the cross border infiltration of terrorists and insurgents from across the border. Cross border infiltration became the biggest threat that destabilized India's security interests in the Northeast. Is that clear? Illegal migrants became a challenge, contributed to problems in Northeast India, which contributed to insurgencies as well. Water sharing issues were not resolved. Land boundary issues were not resolved. So this became a nightmare period for India from 1974 to almost 2009. Is that clear? So these governments were clearly anti-India and pro-Pakistan. The military rule from 74 to 1991 and the BNP government, which won 2 elections from 1990s to early 2000. The only relief we had got was in 1996 when Awami League under Sheikh Hasina won an election and formed a government for 5 years. The only progress was Ganga Water Sharing Treaty was signed. Apart from that, relations couldn't be reset because Awami League was under pressure. It was still facing challenges. It wasn't a very strong government. Sheikh Hasina depended on other parties for outside support. So it wasn't a very strong government that could reverse the relationship. So this hard relationship, this hostile relationship continued until 2009. 2009 was a turning point because in 2009, Sheikh Hasina returned and brought back the Awami League government with full majority. Unlike the weaker government of 1996, she won a full mandate and brought a strong government into place, and immediately she turned around the relationship with India. Sheikh Hasina is single-handedly credited with transforming the India-Bangladesh relationship. Until 2009, Bangladesh was a nightmare for India, but now it has become our closest friend in the region. The credit largely goes to Awami League and Sheikh Hasina because she and her party have always been grateful for the role India played in liberating their country and the way in which India protected her own family as well. Right? So as soon as she came to power, her top priority was to work with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to fulfill India's core interests. The then Manmohan Singh government leveraged the opportunity as soon as Sheikh Hasina came to power. Right? Immediately, she declared that Bangladeshi soil will not be used to target Indian interests. She unleashed a war against insurgent and terror groups and destroyed the safe havens that existed for terror organizations and Northeast insurgent outfits. Is that clear? The safe sanctuaries, these terror camps, were destroyed by Bangladeshi security forces. India, Bangladesh would start coordinating. Our intelligence agencies would collaborate and share intelligence with each other and plan joint operations if necessary. With this coordination, Bangladesh would take down all the top insurgent terror organizations based out of the country. See, today, if Northeast India is largely peaceful and stable, if most of the insurgent groups have died out, the credit goes to Sheikh Hasina and her government and the relationship that India had developed with Sheikh Hasina's government. Today, NSCN, the Naga outfits, they have largely surrendered and they are negotiating with India. They're working out a peace accord. Bodo outfits surrendered and Bodo insurgency has come to an end with signing of a peace accord recently. A group known as Ulfa in Assam has surrendered and even Ulfa is negotiating with the government of India. If all these peace processes are going on in Nagaland, in Assam, and in other parts of Northeast India, the credit goes to Sheikh Hasina and her government. It's because of Sheikh Hasina's government that all the top leaders of these organizations were arrested. Leaders of NSCN like Isaac Muiva, these are the leaders of NSCN outfit. Arvind Rajkova, the leader of Ulfa. Then Ranjan Daimari, the leader of NDFB, National Democratic Front of Borderland. These were top terrorists wanted by India. They were heading insurgent groups that were waging a terror war against India for decades. All these top terrorists were arrested, detained, and handed over to India. The terror camps that existed were destroyed. The supply of funds and weapons were cut off. And this allowed India to clamp down on insurgency and terrorism. That is why the Northeast region became much stable after 2009. That is why these groups have largely surrendered and today they are negotiating with the government of India. All right. Now, let's not go into those details. Don't worry about the insurgent groups as of now. That is for internal security. We have a separate subject and a separate chapter for that. So don't get derailed or distracted by the names I mentioned. Right? I mentioned names like NSCN, Ulfa, and the names of their leaders. Don't get involved into that right now. That was just for your understanding. We'll get into those details under Northeast Insurgency, which is a separate chapter in internal security. For international relations, this is more than enough. Just know that these Northeast insurgent groups were decimated by Bangladesh. India would share intelligence. Bangladeshi forces would destroy the safe camps or the safe havens, the safe sanctuaries that existed were destroyed. The top leaders were arrested and they were even extradited to India. They were handed over to India. Is that clear? So this is what helped in containing Northeast insurgency. It helped us in tackling cross-border terrorism, and Sheikh Hasina improved border security as well. The Bangladeshi border guarding forces, they stepped up their border management with India's border guarding forces. So together, the Indian and Bangladeshi border guarding forces have tackled the security threats, including smuggling, all types of organized crime, pumping of fake currency notes. These threats are still present, but still to a large extent, we have managed to contain the threat. Because see, this border is a very delicate, sensitive border. It's a highly porous border. I told you yesterday that this is the longest land boundary that India shares with its neighboring country, right? With all compared to all the neighbors of India, this is the longest land boundary of India. And the terrain here is very complex. The terrain along the India-Bangladesh border is very complicated. You have multiple rivers, almost 54 rivers cutting across. You have dense forests and mountainous areas as well. And you also have densely populated areas near the border. For example, towards West Bengal, you have villages right next to the border. You have a very big population right near the border area. So it's hard to patrol and guard those areas and prevent infiltration. If you go towards Northeast India, towards Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Mizoram, you have mountainous areas, dense forests, and riverine areas, which is very hard to guard and patrol. These are natural gaps in the border, making the border extremely porous. So that is why illegal migration has continued. That is why some criminal activities continue even today. Even today, trafficking, smuggling is a threat. Pumping of fake currency notes is a threat. Illegal migration and infiltration is still a threat. But compared to before, things are much better due to improved border security. Sheikh Hasina's government has cooperated and improved border security with Indian forces. Is that clear? Do you know which is the border guarding force from India? Which is the border guarding force that India has deployed along the Bangladesh border? We had identified the same for Nepal and Bhutan. It was SSB, right? SSB for Nepal and Bhutan border. So for Bangladeshi border, which is the security force? Some are saying Assam Rifles, BSF, SSB. The correct answer is the BSF, Border Security Force. BSF is the designated border guarding force. Is that clear? For the entire Bangladeshi border, it is BSF which is responsible to deal with all these security threats. That is why Sheikh Hasina's government is extremely crucial for India. Her government single-handedly tackled the security problems, the issue of terrorism, insurgency, criminal activities, and the border challenges that we were facing. Plus, close relations have developed, very close economic ties have developed, and Sheikh Hasina has carried out an economic transformation of Bangladesh. Some of you might know that Bangladesh has grown at a rapid pace. In fact, with regard to human development, with regard to HDI index, Bangladesh performs better than India today in some indicators. With regard to education, with regard to microfinancing, healthcare, right? In general, socio-economic welfare has gone up, it has improved. And on the HDI scale, the Human Development Index, Bangladesh performs even better than India on certain parameters. That is the kind of economic, social transformation that Bangladesh has seen under Sheikh Hasina. It is about to be designated as a developing country. It's a least developed country, and it is all set to become a developing country very soon. So there are more opportunities in Bangladesh itself, right? So this has helped in curbing illegal migration. As the economy has transformed, it has helped in reducing the scale of illegal migration from Bangladesh. See, illegal migration was very high from 1970s to early 2000. During those 30 years, illegal migration was very high because there weren't opportunities in Bangladesh. People were struggling for their livelihood. So they would illegally cross the border into India to find better jobs and better livelihood. Right? That is what was driving illegal migration. Now that Bangladesh has grown, its economy has developed, its social and economic indicators have improved, there are better opportunities available in Bangladesh itself. So it has acted as a natural curb against illegal migration. I'm not saying illegal migration has come to an end. Illegal migration will always be present, right, across any border. But the scale, the extent of illegal migration has gone down drastically after 2010. After Sheikh Hasina coming to power, due to improved border security and border management, and due to fast economic growth, Bangladesh has helped India in curbing and reducing illegal migration. So clearly, we have a close friend in Sheikh Hasina. We have a very close partner with the Awami League government being in power. Got it? So in return for all this favor that Bangladesh had done, India was supposed to return the favor by fulfilling a couple of important promises that were made. The then Manmohan Singh government had committed to resolve the land boundary issue and the Teesta water sharing issue, as both the issues were crucial for Sheikh Hasina. She and her party, they had won the election by promising the resolution of these issues. So India had promised to sign the Teesta water sharing agreement and resolve the land boundary issue in return for all the favor that Bangladesh had delivered for India, for all the support that Bangladesh and Sheikh Hasina had given. India had promised that we will also help Sheikh Hasina's government by signing the Teesta water sharing agreement, which is a major issue in Bangladesh and India. And we had also promised to resolve the land boundary issue, or also known as the enclave issue. This was a promise that had been made. But unfortunately, the then Manmohan Singh government could not deliver both the promises. Is that clear? The land boundary issue could not be finalized and the Teesta water agreement could not be signed. This was a result of domestic politics. It was an impact of coalition politics and regional politics. These political developments within India derailed our foreign policy towards Bangladesh. It derailed our ties with a friendly Bangladeshi government. All right? So we need to understand this in detail. The Manmohan Singh government had finalized a land boundary agreement to resolve the enclave issue permanently. It was a pending issue from 1947. But to carry out this change, to provide for the resolution of the enclave issue, a constitutional amendment was necessary. But I hope you know that Manmohan Singh government was a coalition government, a weak coalition government which didn't have enough numbers on its own in the parliament. Opposition parties in the parliament unnecessarily politicized the issue. They didn't support the constitutional amendment that was needed to work out the land boundary agreement. So as a result, land boundary agreement was derailed because of the weakness of the government in the parliament. It didn't have enough numbers on its own. It didn't have full majority in the parliament. Opposition parties made a political issue out of the agreement because there was a key national issue attached to it. All right? But by resolving the issue, it would have helped our relations. It would have served a bigger national interest. But opposition parties played politics with the issue. They didn't allow the agreement to be finalized. They didn't support the constitutional amendment. And as a result, India could not fulfill the promise of the land boundary agreement. Coming to Teesta water agreement, the impact of coalition politics and regional politics from West Bengal derailed the government of India. The weak Manmohan Singh government, the then UPA government, it was dependent on outside support from coalition partners like the Trinamool Congress and the left in West Bengal. These parties, along with even the Congress and the BJP, they wouldn't back the Teesta water agreement. That is at the state level, at the regional level in West Bengal. None of the regional parties and even the national parties would support the Teesta water agreement. Is that clear? They wouldn't allow the government to go ahead, and this was an impact of coalition politics and regional politics. So India failed to fulfill both the promises. But later, in 2015, the land boundary agreement has been fulfilled. When the Modi government came to power, it had enough numbers in the parliament to push for a constitutional amendment that was necessary. But the irony is that the same party which was in opposition had opposed the deal before for political reasons, right? By playing domestic politics, the then opposition party had derailed the constitutional amendment. But after coming to power, the same bill was pushed, the same agreement, right? Resolving this issue was in the interest of both India and Bangladesh. Unnecessarily, the issue had been politicized. Since Manmohan Singh government was weak, didn't have enough numbers, it couldn't get support for a constitutional amendment. Now, the same agreement was brought back in 2015 and the constitutional amendment was enacted, which resolved the land boundary issue. Is that clear? I'll explain this issue in detail. We'll come to that after a short break. Teesta Water Agreement is unresolved even today. Even the Modi government, which has full majority, has not been able to finalize the Teesta Water Agreement because of regional politics. Right? All the parties have a vested interest in not signing the Teesta Agreement. We'll understand this when we come to water sharing issues with Bangladesh. So we'll take a short break right now, 15 minutes break. We'll come back at 7 p.m. and we'll discuss all the small topics that are left and we'll wrap up India and Bangladesh. So take a break till 7 p.m., 7 1 p.m. It's already 6:46. So let's come back at 7 1. All right. So land boundary agreement, we'll discuss that in detail along with the enclave issue. We will discuss Teesta agreement, understand why it has still not been signed even by the Modi government. We'll discuss that at the last when we come to water sharing disputes. Other than that, we have a few more topics. We'll wrap up all of them and complete this chapter after the break. So I'll see you back at 7 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the session. Now, let's talk about the land boundary issue between India and Bangladesh. It's also called the enclave issue. So, let's understand what this issue was all about. The enclave issue was a legacy that was left behind by the partition. Basically, it was again a colonial blunder that had been committed. And for many decades, India had to pay the price along with Bangladesh for this colonial mistake that was done. See, when India Pakistan were granted independence in 1947, to partition Bengal and Punjab, a commission had been set up known as the Radcliffe Commission, the Radcliffe Committee. It was the responsibility of the Radcliffe Committee to partition India and Pakistan. That is essentially to bifurcate the Punjab province and the Bengal province. So, as part of this partition, the Radcliffe Commission did not adopt the right scientific methods. They used outdated maps. They did not conduct ground level surveys and exercises. They didn't consult the local people. They sat in offices in Delhi, used old, outdated maps, and drew lines, sometimes random lines, thus causing a haphazard partition of the Indian subcontinent. Imagine such an important responsibility where the task of the commission would influence the lives of millions of people. Such an important responsibility was handled in a careless manner by the colonial government. The mistakes done by the Radcliffe Commission left behind a lasting legacy. The boundary that you have between India and Pakistan and India and Bangladesh, this boundary line is called the Radcliffe line. Is that clear? The present day boundary that India has with Pakistan and Bangladesh, both of them are called the Radcliffe line because it was drawn by the Radcliffe Committee. Because Bangladesh was part of Pakistan, it was East Pakistan when India Pakistan were partitioned. Now, in this map, please pay attention. You can see the India Bangladesh boundary here. This blue line is the boundary. This is the Radcliffe line that marked the borders between India and then East Pakistan. So Bangladesh inherited the same boundary. So as a result, the land boundary issue continued even after Bangladesh was created. India had made many attempts to resolve this issue with Pakistan when East Pakistan existed. But Pakistan, being a hostile country, it never cooperated. It would derail any Indian initiative, and it had never allowed the land boundary issue to be resolved. So finally, when we got a friendly government in Bangladesh under Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, India was very confident that we will resolve the issue. So an initial land boundary agreement had been signed in 1970s. After Bangladesh was created, an initial agreement had been signed, a land boundary agreement, to resolve this issue permanently. But before we could implement the changes, unfortunately, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. The Bangladeshi military took over, and Bangladesh became hostile to India, as we just studied. So this issue dragged for another 30 years. For another 3 decades, the issue persisted, and we never got an opportunity to resolve this issue. So let's understand what the issue is all about. And then I'll talk about how the enclave issue has been resolved today. In this map, if you observe, you will notice small patches of orange, small territories of orange located inside Bangladesh, located across the border inside Bangladesh. Similarly, you will notice small territories of green, which is located in India, surrounded by West Bengal. These are essentially territories of India, Bangladesh, respectively. The orange territories that you see here These are essentially Indian territories. Several Indian villages were left behind in Pakistan on the other side of the border. So, from India's perspective, this becomes an Indian exclave. From Bangladesh's perspective, it becomes an enclave of India. Is that clear? An enclave or an exclave is a territory of another country surrounded entirely by one more country. From India's perspective, it's an exclave, our territory located outside of India, surrounded by another country. From Bangladesh's perspective, these Indian territories become Indian enclaves, that is surrounded by Bangladesh. Similarly, on the Indian side, there were several Pakistani territories or later Bangladeshi territories. So in total, we had 111 Indian enclaves surrounded by Bangladesh, which was home to around 34,000 people. There were 51 enclaves of Bangladesh inside India with a population of around 17,000 people. So since these territories were present on the other side of the border, it became a major challenge for both the countries. Now, can you guys guess what is the challenge that will arise because of this? What will happen? What is the problem created by such a situation? If there is an international border and if each other's enclaves are located on the other side, surrounded entirely by another country, what problem will come up? What challenge will come up? Let me know in the comments. Citizenship problem? No, there won't be a citizenship problem. I'll tell you why. Those Indians who are in Indian territories, they will have Indian citizenship. But in Bangladeshi enclaves, the people will have Bangladeshi citizenship. Citizenship is not a problem. Very good. Some of them have got the right answer. Administration of these territories becomes a nightmare. Connectivity, transportation, communication with the region becomes almost impossible, especially when we have hostile relations between these two countries. Let's imagine we had friendly ties with the other country. Maybe then you could have worked out some corridors, connectivity corridors through which we could have connected India with our territories and Bangladesh with its territories. But it can be done only when you have maybe one or two enclaves. If you have 111 Indian enclaves and 51 Bangladeshi enclaves, even creating those corridors is not possible. Upon that, Bangladesh was hostile to India from 1970s to 2009. Plus, we had severe border problems. We had cross-border infiltration, organized crime. Because of all these challenges, administration becomes a challenge. Essentially, Indian authorities of the government of India, state authorities, district authorities from West Bengal, they can never reach these Indian territories. They can not provide for governance. They can't provide the benefits of governance. They can't deliver government services. Even holding elections became a challenge. And there is no connectivity, there is no communication, no transportation, thus compromising the economy of these areas and affecting the livelihood of the people of these territories. So it became a humanitarian issue as well. The people of these territories will be affected. They have no future here, right? They can't access basic services that the government is providing. The administration cannot reach out to them. They can't take part in our economic growth, and the overall well-being of these territories and the people here is permanently compromised. So the only solution available in such a complex situation is to exchange the enclaves. That's the only practical solution. You cannot redraw the boundary. No country will agree to redrawing the boundary. If you try to redraw the boundary around these territories, there will be a large-scale transfer of territory. Right? Both sides will lose a lot of territory if you try to redraw the boundary. So no country will agree to redrawing the boundary. Like I said, if it was just one enclave, we could have created a corridor to connect with the enclave. When you have hundreds of them, creating corridors is also impossible. So the only practical solution to settle this issue forever is to exchange these territories permanently. That is, you allow the merging of these territories with the other country. So Indian enclaves will merge with Bangladesh and it will become Bangladeshi territory. And Bangladeshi enclaves in India will merge with India and it will become Indian territory. That is the only practical solution. In any such exchange, one country might lose a small area of its territory. If you calculate the area of all these enclaves and take the difference, one country or the other will give up some territory in net terms, right? Obviously, the area will not be the same. So this is about practicality. It's not about protecting your sovereignty or your rights. It's about thinking about these people, thinking about the administrative challenges, and both countries negotiating in a mature manner to exchange these enclaves, to merge the territories permanently. So end result would be that one country will lose some territory. A small part of your area will be lost. This is acceptable. It is fine. It's a small price to pay to resolve such a complex issue. So if you take the area of these enclaves, it would be India which would lose a small part of its territory, because we had 111 enclaves, whereas there were only 51 enclaves of Bangladesh in India. So if you take the area of both and take the difference, in net terms, we would be transferring a small part of our territory to Bangladesh. This was an acceptable solution. Both India and Bangladesh agreed to it. And we finalized a land boundary agreement. As promised, the Manmohan Singh government and Sheikh Hasina government, they finalized a land boundary agreement. Now, the only pending issue was it required a constitutional amendment. I hope you guys have studied this in polity. In Indian polity, you would have studied a very important article. The article says that India cannot cede territory. We can't give away our territory to another country. Is that clear? But if, under any circumstance, if India has to cede some of its territory to another country, that power does not lie with the government of India. The government of India, under any context, has no power to give away our territory to another country. Now, you guys tell me, which authority has the power to transfer a part of Indian territory? You guys tell me which institution in the country has been vested with this constitutional power to cede or transfer a part of our territory to another country. Very good. It's the Indian Parliament. Do you know which article in the Indian Constitution talks about this? Which is the article? Very good. Article 3. According to Article 3, Indian Parliament can cede territory to another country through a constitutional amendment under Article 368. It requires a special majority in the Parliament. It requires a special majority to get this amendment done as per provisions of 368 and Article 3, following which we can transfer a part of Indian territory to another country. This is where the Manmohan Singh government faced a challenge. The government of India was very interested to uphold the promise we had made. Remember the help Sheikh Hasina had given, the Bangladeshi help. Bangladesh had helped us in curbing insurgency and terrorism, in securing our borders, in addressing all the major concerns of India. So one favor that Bangladesh expected from India was to fulfill this agreement. The government of India was more than happy to do this. The agreement had been finalized. But when the constitutional amendment was brought in, there was chaos in the parliament. Opposition parties politicized the issue. They did not cooperate with the government, and the government didn't have enough numbers on its own to get the special majority. It was a weak coalition government, dependent on coalition partners, dependent on outside support. For this amendment to be passed, special majority was needed, which meant even opposition support was necessary. Ideally, in national interest, the parties should have come together. But because of politicization of the issue by all the parties involved, the issue got derailed and the government didn't have enough numbers to get the amendment done. So thus, India failed in its commitment. Bangladesh was not happy that despite helping India in all the security matters, India was not able to fulfill one basic promise. We couldn't even sign the Teesta Water Agreement. The Teesta Water Sharing Agreement had been finalized. So both the agreements failed, and as a result, Bangladesh was not happy with India. So this is an example of how domestic politics and coalition regional politics can derail our foreign policy. I'm stressing on this point because UPSC might ask a question here. See, the politics is irrelevant. It doesn't matter which party did what from the examination point of view. But you should understand that foreign policy is a union subject. Only the government of India has the sole power to run our foreign policy. But opposition parties and regional parties and state governments, they often derail our foreign policy by exercising pressure, by politicizing certain issues. So there might be a question asking you to explain how coalition politics or domestic politics or regional politics can derail our foreign policy. This is one example. The land boundary agreement, the Teesta water issue, and when we come to Sri Lanka, even there we will discuss certain issues from Tamil Nadu, where regional politics in the state of Tamil Nadu has derailed our foreign policy towards Sri Lanka. Similarly, the Teesta water agreement was derailed because of regional politics from West Bengal. Land boundary agreement was derailed because of domestic politics within the parliament due to lack of support from opposition parties. All right, these are examples that you can quote to explain how regional coalition politics and domestic politics can derail our foreign policy. Finally, in 2015, the next government, the Modi government, which came to power, it was a majority government which had enough numbers in the parliament on its own. And the irony is that it introduced the same constitution amendment bill. There wasn't any change. I'm pointing it out because, again, see, it's not one party which is to be blamed. Be it BJP, be it Congress, be it the regional parties, they all share the blame for politicizing the issues here. In this case, the current ruling party back then was in opposition. So they got together with other parties and opposed the amendment because the issue had been politicized. Now, after coming to power, the same agreement was pushed. But it was a good development for our relations with Bangladesh because finally the 100th Constitutional Amendment Act was enacted. Kindly remember this. The 100th Constitutional Amendment Act was enacted by the parliament because the Modi government had enough numbers in the parliament to push the amendment through. With this, the land boundary agreement was implemented and we have completed the exchange of all these enclaves. So the land boundary issue has been resolved as of today. Within a couple of years after the constitutional amendment was done, India-Bangladesh completed the process of exchanging these territories. So all the 111 Indian enclaves merged with Bangladesh became Bangladeshi territory forever. and the Bangladeshi enclaves in India, they merged with India and they have become part of Indian territory. With this, the enclave issue is permanently resolved. The land boundary issue has been settled. Now, one last point. What about the people in these enclaves? What happened to them? See, territories can be exchanged. It's just a merger of the territory. There will be some paperwork involved. So you can make all the changes on the ground and transfer the administration as well. That is something you can do quite easily. But what about the people? Right? There are thousands of people in these enclaves. What will happen to them? What about their citizenship? So this is where India, Bangladesh adopted a flexible approach. Since these people have suffered for decades, a flexible approach was needed on humanitarian grounds. You can't force them to retain their citizenship. Correct? Because please understand, in Bangladeshi enclaves that are surrounded by West Bengal, they would be Bangladeshi citizens. They would have grown up in these enclaves. There would be generations that would have come. But their whole life would have been spent on the Indian side with no connection with Bangladesh. So it wouldn't be right to force them to hold on to Bangladeshi citizenship, to force them to go back to Bangladesh. Similarly, there would be Indian citizens on the other side who would have spent their whole life, their entire family would be based out of there. You can't force them to come back to India just to push them to hold the citizenship, right? So both governments adopted a flexible approach and gave the choice to the people. The choice was given to the people of these enclaves to decide and opt for the citizenship that they want, which means Indians, if they want to retain the Indian citizenship, they will have to move back, right? They'll have to leave those previous enclaves, cross the border and come to India and settle in India if they want Indian citizenship to be retained. Or else they have the option of giving up Indian citizenship and merging with Bangladesh along with the territory. And vice versa. Bangladeshi citizens in the enclaves of Bangladesh, they can merge with India, take up Indian citizenship, or if they want Bangladeshi citizenship, they have to go back. So this flexibility was given to them along with welfare measures to support and protect these people. Both governments set aside a dedicated amount to provide them compensation, create jobs for them, to provide houses and other basic facilities for them, which had been denied to these people for many, many decades. Is that clear? Both governments worked to try and create livelihood opportunities for these people, to build houses for those who are coming back, right? Because they have to give up everything they have on the other side if they choose to retain the citizenship. So the flexibility was given to them so they can choose the citizenship they want. And for those who come back to their country, they were given a lot of support, economic support from the government, from building houses to getting them a job and settling them down. So with this process, we have completed the exchange of the enclaves, and today the issue is fully resolved. Is that clear? It's a very important topic. You can expect a 10-mark mains question on the enclave issue. You can even expect some prelims questions related to 100th Constitutional Amendment or Ratcliffe Line or Article 3. So please focus on these key topics and also understand how domestic politics in this case at the national level derailed our foreign policy towards Bangladesh. Is that clear? Teesta issue, I'll take it up at the end when we come to water sharing disputes. Next, let's look at connectivity projects. India, Bangladesh have focused on bringing their economies closer, and Bangladesh has finally given transit access to India. Bangladesh has given transit access to India, which means India can connect with the northeast region via Bangladeshi territory. We don't have to just depend on Siliguri corridor, which is the only link between Northeast India and rest of India. We can bypass our dependency. We can bypass our dependency on the Siliguri corridor, which is a choke point. And by using Bangladeshi roads, Bangladeshi railway lines, and also inland navigation, and by connecting them with Indian roads, railway lines, and inland routes, we have opened alternate route of connection to Northeast India. Alternate routes have been opened, which provides development opportunities for the Northeast region, which is also a landlocked region. Northeast region has remained underdeveloped. It lacks infrastructure. This is also one reason which has driven insurgency in the Northeast region. So, to bring better development, you have to create better connectivity, provide better infrastructure. It will help in countering insurgency as well. So, providing development to Northeast India has been a priority for India from many years, especially under the Look East, Act East policy. We will study this policy later. We have a separate class for Look East, Act East policy. This policy focuses on Southeast Asia and East Asia. It's a dedicated foreign policy of India to improve our relations with Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries. Previously, it was called Look East policy. Now it's called Act East policy. So under these policies, one of the priority is to connect Northeast region with Southeast Asian countries, because the Northeast region shares direct borders with Myanmar, which is a Southeast Asian country. So India's vision under Look East, Act East policy has been to better connect the Northeast region with Myanmar and further with Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries, so that Northeast products and goods can be exported to Southeast Asia. From Southeast Asian countries, investments can be brought to Northeast region. This will help drive the development of Northeast region. So this has been a policy focus under the Look East, Act East policy of India. So Bangladesh becomes critical because transit access via Bangladesh will help India to create better infrastructure, better facilities in the Northeast, create alternate routes of connectivity, and drive economic growth and development in the northeastern states. So we are achieving this by launching new bus routes. There are direct buses that run between major Indian towns and cities and Bangladeshi towns and cities. For example, you have direct connectivity between Kolkata and Dhaka. All right. We have several rail routes which have already been opened. Some are functioning, and there are many new rail projects that have been proposed and planned. So these road and rail connectivity projects, they are bringing India-Bangladesh closer and creating a new route to reach Northeast India. Strategic ports of Bangladesh like Mongla and Chittagong are being used to connect with Indian ports, thus providing for better utilization of Bay of Bengal. I'll show you a map. I'll help you understand how this connectivity will work. We have announced a concessional loan, a line of credit of $2 billion, which Bangladesh can utilize for some of these infrastructure projects. Recently, for example, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had visited India a few months ago. During this visit, many new projects were announced, right? That includes several road and rail projects to connect India-Bangladesh. So please look at the map here. You can see the railway lines that have been planned from all the sites. From West Bengal, from Assam and Meghalaya, from Tripura, even via Siliguri. So this creates new routes, new railway routes through which we can connect with Bangladesh and further with Northeast India. We can directly connect from West Bengal to Northeast region without passing through Siliguri. A rail route has been planned from Agartala to Akhura in Bangladesh. Similarly, road connection has been established. Buses are allowed to run and trucks which carry goods, they are allowed to move around between India and Bangladesh. We have also facilitated the movement of people as well. We have many land border points where the cross border movement has been supported to improve trade and people to people relations. We are connecting Indian ports with the strategic ports of Bangladesh like Mongla and Chittagong. Chittagong is also known as Chattogram. These are strategic ports of Bangladesh that face Bay of Bengal. Is that clear? So Indian ports like Kolkata, Vishakhapatnam, then Paradip and other minor ports as well, they can directly link with Mongla and Chittagong. And from here, we can transport the goods through inland navigation. That is on the waterways that India, Bangladesh have created. We already have national waterways in India on the Ganga River, Brahmaputra, Barak, right? We have created inland navigation routes, also known as national waterways of India, just like you have national highways for roads. Bangladesh also has created inland navigation on its part of the Ganga, Brahmaputra, and the Barak. So through the Meghna River and the other rivers which head towards India, inland routes have been opened which allows inland shipping. So let's say goods from South India can be brought to East Coast, to the eastern ports of India. From there, we can take the goods to Mongla or Chittagong through Bay of Bengal, and then we can transport the goods directly to Northeast India via Bangladeshi rivers. So these are the kind of connectivity projects which are going on. Some of them are functioning already, and there are many more which have been proposed and they will be executed very soon. So this brings India, Bangladesh closer, creates alternate route to Northeast India, and it will help us connect Northeast India with Southeast Asia as well. We will discuss few projects under India, Myanmar. So there you will get a better idea as to how these connectivity projects will help in connecting Northeast region with Southeast Asian countries. So that's why connectivity projects between India, Bangladesh are extremely important. All right, we have already studied the BBIN initiative, which provides for a motor vehicles agreement for promoting free movement of trucks. It will provide free movement of goods between India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Right? We studied this under Nepal and Bhutan. India, Bangladesh are also part of a grouping called BIMSTEC. It's a regional grouping focused on Bay of Bengal region. So under BIMSTEC as well, there are several transport and connectivity projects that have been planned, that have been proposed, which will bring India, Bangladesh closer. Is that clear? We will study BIMSTEC separately. Once we finish a few countries, I'll have a discussion on some important regional groupings like SAARC and BIMSTEC. We'll study that maybe tomorrow. All right. So BIMSTEC is one such important regional organization where India, Bangladesh are working together in the Bay of Bengal region to establish better transport and connectivity projects. We were also part of an initiative called BCIM Forum that included Bangladesh, India, China, and Myanmar. It was a corridor proposed by China to connect these four countries. India was interested initially, but later India has backed out because of the problems we have with China. And also China saw this project as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. As I told you in the other class, India has boycotted Belt and Road Initiative. India will never take part in China's Belt and Road Initiative. All right. So since we have boycotted the Belt and Road Initiative, when China saw this as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, India decided to boycott BCIM Forum, which was supposed to be a connectivity corridor. So BCIM is no longer relevant, but China is going ahead with its connectivity projects with Myanmar and Bangladesh. Is that clear? As part of its Belt and Road Initiative, it's connecting with Bangladesh and Myanmar, but India has quit this initiative. We are no longer part of it as we have opposed and boycotted the Belt and Road Initiative. You'll get more idea about this when we discuss Belt and Road Initiative separately. In the next chapter, we will discuss China's projects in Myanmar as well. All right. Even in Bangladesh, China has played a very big role. For example, China has investments at the Chittagong port. China has played a role in the development of Chittagong port. China has invested in various infrastructure projects, including power plants. It has built roads and bridges. It has financed the construction of key bridges and waterway networks. China has even started supplying weapons to Bangladesh. So here as well, there is a direct competition between India and China. It's a fight for influence. Just like India, China are in competition in Nepal, you find a similar strategic competition here, as China has provided a lot of investments for port projects, for construction of bridges, railway lines, power plants, and special economic zones. It has even set up a strategic defense relationship with Bangladesh and has supplied weapons as well to Bangladesh. So this is a constant fight for influence between the two major Asian powers. You see this competition in almost every country in the region. All right. So I'm just trying to shed some light on that. We did the same under Nepal, and we will do the same with other countries like Sri Lanka, Maldives, etc. You should have a fair idea as to what kind of investments China has already made and how India has to compete to remain relevant in these neighboring countries. Is that clear? So this is the basic requirement as far as India-Bangladesh connectivity projects are concerned. You don't have to mug up the names of each project, not required. There are many railway projects, road projects. You don't have to sit and remember the name of every project, but at least some of them, right? At least a general understanding will be very, very helpful. We have also started a pipeline recently between India and Bangladesh. There is a new pipeline that we have inaugurated. All right. Now, I want you guys to take this as an exercise. Please find out the name and the places that the pipeline connects and what does it transport. All right. It was in current affairs. That's why I'm giving this as a small exercise for you. Please read about this. I will discuss it again tomorrow. All right. I'll check how many of you have actually read. You just have to cover 3 points. What is the name of this pipeline? Which places does it connect? What does the pipeline transport from India to Bangladesh? Please read about these 3 points. The facts are important for your prelims. Is that clear? So this completes my brief discussion on connectivity projects between India and Bangladesh. Now let's take a look at the defense and security cooperation. Now you already have an idea about the security risks that we face, from the presence of terror sanctuaries to border security threats, presence of organized crime, illegal migration. So we have dealt with plenty of security problems. So to deal with these challenges, we need very close defense security ties with Bangladesh. So let's understand what kind of relations have we established. To tackle the Pakistan-sponsored terror groups like Huji and Lashkar, to tackle Northeast insurgent outfits, the two countries have set up very close intelligence cooperation. We coordinate with each other in the field of counterterrorism, and as well as in the field of border security. These are priority areas for both India and Bangladesh. Thanks to a friendly government under Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, India has got enough help from Bangladeshi security agencies and forces. Right? It was because of this intelligence cooperation we could eliminate several Northeast insurgent groups. Today, border security is much better compared to before. Large part of the border has been fenced, better surveillance has been deployed, better patrolling is being carried out to check organized crime, infiltration, or cross border movement, and as well as the entry of illegal migrants. Is that clear? There is extensive focus on countering terrorism because there are terror groups that threaten both the countries. For example, we have seen a rise of extremism in Bangladesh, and even global terror organizations like Al Qaeda and Islamic State have increased their influence in Bangladesh. Is that clear? So there is a base for extremism and radicalism that exists in the country. In fact, this is a challenge, a common challenge for India and Sheikh Hasina's government. See, within the Bangladeshi society, there is a major divide. There is a major divide within Bangladesh. The divide is between secular nationalist forces on one side, represented by parties like Awami League, right? They believe in secularism, right? They believe in tolerating, respecting freedom of religion. They respect religious minorities. They were the ones who fought for the liberation of Bangladesh from Pakistan, right? They are the ones who are grateful to India for all the help India has given. And even today, the secular nationalists are trying to punish the war criminals from the Pakistan era, right? There were Pakistani officers before 1971 who had committed these atrocities, killed lakhs of Bengalis. So since then, the secular nationalist forces like Awami League, they have tried to apprehend these war criminals and punish them. All right? But on the other hand, there is another section which is a radical section. There are radical forces in Bangladesh. They are still pro-Pakistan. They still oppose the creation of Bangladesh. They align with Pakistan's ideology. They align with religious fundamentalism and majoritarianism. These are the elements who are targeting religious minorities as well in Bangladesh. You have few radical groups, like for example, the Jamaat-e-Islami. It's a student radical outfit based out of Bangladesh, which is linked with parties like the BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. These groups, they have nurtured radical forces, they have ties with radical elements, and they also have links with terror organizations like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Huji, Islamic State, and Al Qaeda. So we have noticed a disturbing trend where there is a rise in these radical forces. Several minority groups have been targeted. For example, Bengali Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, and even certain sections of Muslims have been targeted by these radical extremist elements. So the rising influence of radical extremist groups is a threat for Bangladesh as well and for India as well. For India, the friend in Bangladesh happens to be the secular nationalist forces like Awami League. Is that clear? So within Bangladesh, there are many people who are pro-India, who believe in secularism, who believe in the liberation of Bangladesh, who are grateful to India for the struggle and the contribution of India. But there are few elements who are aligned towards Pakistan and radical elements. They still nurture radicalism, causing persecution of religious minorities and also support base for terrorist organizations. So tackling this threat is a common concern for India-Bangladesh. That is why we have set up close intelligence cooperation, counter-terrorism cooperation between the two countries. We even have a joint military exercise known as Sampriti. It's between the two armies. The Indian Army and Bangladeshi Army conduct a joint exercise with focus on counter-terrorism. Is that clear? Apart from that, we are focused on maritime security as well. Because don't forget, we share maritime borders in the Bay of Bengal. So dealing with threats in Bay of Bengal is also a priority. So there is very close cooperation between our navies as well. All right. So India is sharing its expertise and even weapons with Bangladesh. We do supply some weapons to Bangladeshi forces. We help in their training as well. We provide training assistance, we supply some defense technology, and we conduct joint exercises as well. Is that clear? So this is the extent of defense security cooperation between India and Bangladesh. So now we come to the last two topics. We'll discuss the nature of economic relations, and we will look at the water sharing disputes. The water sharing disputes between the two countries. The last two topics under India Bangladesh. As I told you, Bangladesh is a fast growing economy. It has seen a lot of progress in the last couple of decades. Especially after Sheikh Hasina came to power, Bangladesh has grown, right? And there are many major sectors in Bangladesh which is driving growth in the country. For example, textile production, pharmaceuticals, engineering equipment, then jute cultivation, paddy cultivation. These are some areas, including fishing, where Bangladesh is a major player. That is the strength area of Bangladesh. Textiles, most of your apparels, even shoes, your branded clothing equipment, they're all produced in Bangladesh, from Nike to Adidas to Puma and whatnot, right? There are major textile factories, clothing equipment, and other consumer products which are produced here. This economy of Bangladesh is closely linked with India. India is a major supplier of raw material and goods. In fact, with that regard, Bangladesh has a lot of dependency on India. There are many critical exports from India which sustains the economy of Bangladesh. Bangladesh also exports a lot, especially paddy, jute, fish. Many key raw materials are provided from Bangladesh as well. For example, the Hilsa fish, which is a lifeline of Bengali cuisine, right, is largely exported from Bangladesh to India. So there is a very close economic relationship that exists, and in fact, it is the largest economic relationship in South Asia. Amongst all the neighboring countries, India has the biggest trading relationship with Bangladesh. So no wonder this is the most important relationship for us. Apart from the security concerns, strategic relationship, and close political ties, the close economic ties also makes Bangladesh the most important neighbor of India. This is the biggest trading relationship for India in the neighborhood. But there are certain issues which are affecting the trade between the two countries. All right, there are some issues. For example, there is a large trade deficit that favors India. Since India is the supplier of most of the raw materials, right? We have a lot of exports going from India to Bangladesh, but we import a little less from Bangladesh. So there is a big deficit, a trade deficit that comes up, which hurts Bangladeshi interests. And Bangladesh also has a complaint that there are high non-tariff barriers. Remember, in the first class, I told you that there are many barriers to trade. For foreign trade between two countries, there are barriers to trade. One is your tariff barriers, tariff-based barriers, which is related to taxes and duties, like import duties, custom duties, anti-dumping duties, right? All these are different taxes that are levied on imports. If these tariffs or taxes, if they are high, it becomes a barrier to trade. All right. The other barrier is non-tariff. Anything that is not related to taxes. They are all called non-tariff barriers. This could be lack of connectivity. Imagine if connectivity is not good. Let's say there is no road infrastructure connecting the two countries, no railway network, right? That becomes a non-tariff barrier. Let's say there are very strict visa immigration policies. It prevents the movement of people. It prevents the movement of traders, investors, businessmen, right? That obviously will hamper your economic relations. It will affect the movement of tourists. So this becomes a non-tariff barrier. The lack of infrastructure, the lack of connectivity, the lack of border infrastructure. At the border, you need trading facilities to facilitate the quick movement of people and goods, right? You need simplified, relaxed visa immigration policies. So this is where India, Bangladesh are facing a major problem. We have a lot of non-tariff barriers, right? We didn't have enough border connectivity. We didn't have enough border trading facilities. That is where India, Bangladesh are working upon. See, since we have the problem of infiltration of terrorists and entry of illegal migrants, visa immigration policy of India is very, very strict. But apart from the visa norms, we can work on other issues. We can improve connectivity, improve infrastructure, provide for better border trading facilities so that we can improve trade between the two countries. We can also encourage Indian investments, right? That will help in addressing the trade deficit. India is actually pushing the private sector to invest more. And we have proposed a special economic zone in Bangladesh for Indian industries. Several large Indian industries and manufacturing sector from India, they are being encouraged by the government to invest more in Bangladesh. And we have proposed a special economic zone exclusively for Indian factories, Indian industries that will operate in Bangladesh. So this will drive capital from India to Bangladesh. It will help in addressing the trade deficit. It will create jobs in Bangladesh. It will improve the trade between the two countries. We have also taken up projects to improve trading infrastructure. We are setting up 4 major integrated checkposts or ICPs. It's basically a land border point. It's a land port. Just like you have airports and seaports, which are the ports of entry into a country. Similarly, at land borders, you set up land ports, right? Where people and goods can be exchanged between two countries. So India, Bangladesh have set up 4 major ICPs. You might have heard of a ICP with Pakistan. India, Pakistan have one such land port or land border point, which is at the Wagah Atari checkpost. At Wagah Atari border point, we have an integrated checkpost between India and Pakistan. At this facility, at this land port, all the required facilities are provided under a single terminal. Like, for example, in your airports, right, in your international airports, you have your immigration authorities, security officials, custom officials, right? So whoever is involved in the movement of people and goods, who regulate them, they are all present in a single building, in a single terminal at the airport. That is what facilitates the quick movement of people and goods at your airports and seaports. Similar facilities are being given here at the land ports by setting up these ICPs, integrated checkposts. These ICPs will have all the modern facilities. They will have modern security equipment, scanning equipment. The intelligence authorities will be present, custom officials, immigration authorities, right? Then various security agencies which regulate border trade and border movement. They will all be present under one single head, under one single terminal. So when people and goods are moving around, right, the processing can be done quickly. The checks can be done quickly. The taxes can be imposed very quickly. So you reduce the time taken and you facilitate the movement of people and goods. So please remember the 4 ICPs that are being set up along the India-Bangladesh border. At Petropol in West Bengal, a ICP has been opened. This is the largest land port in Asia. In the entire Asia region, Petropol ICP is the largest land port facility. We have a land port at Agartala in Tripura, another ICP at Dauki in Meghalaya, and Sutarkandi in Assam. So they facilitate the easy movement of people and goods to improve the trade relationship. We also conduct border hearths or border festivals, or border fair would be appropriate term. This is conducted at the level of border villages to promote border trade between the two countries. Across the border, right, there are several villages on both the sides which have a historical trading relationship. We facilitate them by hosting a border fair. Every month or fortnightly or weekly, these local fairs are organized, where people from both sides are allowed to mingle near the border and they are allowed to exchange their goods. Is that clear? It promotes cultural relations as well and economic relations as well. It will help promote the border economy in the border villages. So such border hearths or border fairs are organized by both the sides to facilitate border trade and also to promote cultural interaction between India and Bangladesh. So this is the kind of economic relations that we have pursued. Of course, there are challenges, but we are trying to address them. There is also a proposed free trade agreement. India, Bangladesh have proposed a free trade agreement. They are negotiating a FTA. When Sheikh Hasina visited India recently, both Prime Minister Modi and Sheikh Hasina spoke about the need for a free trade agreement to eliminate the tariffs, to remove the taxation barrier and improve the infrastructure and connectivity so that we can promote the free movement of goods and people. Is that clear? So that explains the nature of economic relations between India and Bangladesh. Now let's look at the last topic, the water sharing issues between India and Bangladesh. Let's cover this topic and that will be the end of the chapter, and I'll take up all your questions and doubts. Let's begin with the Teesta dispute. Then we'll discuss Tipaimukh Dam dispute, Feni dispute, and Farakka barrage dispute. Is that clear? And I'll also be talking about a recent water sharing agreement that was signed called the Kushiara Water Sharing Agreement. These are the last few topics. Water sharing in itself is a big topic under India-Bangladesh because we share 54 transboundary rivers. So when so many rivers are flowing down from India to Bangladesh, there will be a lot of disputes. Please remember, in the case of all the rivers, India is the upper riparian state. That is, India is located in the upstream of these rivers. Whereas Bangladesh is at a natural disadvantage because it's a lower riparian state. It's present at the, or it's located at the downstream of these rivers. So these rivers are flowing down from India to Bangladesh. So India has a greater control over the flow of these rivers, and how we manage the waters will affect Bangladesh as well. So obviously Bangladesh has a lot of concerns and it wants water sharing agreements to be signed to resolve these water sharing disputes. So let's look at the Teesta dispute. The Teesta River is one of the important rivers flowing from India to Bangladesh. It originates in the state of Sikkim. It originates in the Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve. I'm sure you guys would have heard about Mount Kanchenjunga, one of the highest peaks in the Himalayan range. At the foothills of Kanchenjunga, there is a glacier called Zongu Glacier or the Zemu Glacier. This is the origin of the Teesta. It originates at the Zongu or Zemu Glacier inside the Kanchenjunga Biosphere Reserve near the foothills of Mount Kanchenjunga. From here, the river flows down through Sikkim. It enters West Bengal near the Darjeeling Kalimpong belt, flows through Siliguri corridor, and then enters Bangladesh. The waters of Teesta are vital for West Bengal and also for the people of Bangladesh. Both sides are heavily dependent on the waters of Teesta for drinking. That is potable water, clean, safe potable water is needed for drinking purposes. The water is used for irrigation as well, to irrigate the agricultural fields. It is used for industrial consumption and even for fishing, etc. So both sides have a lot of dependency on the waters of the Teesta. Now, India has already built few projects in the upstream region, right? Especially in the Siliguri belt, we have number of projects on the Teesta that controls the flow, and the water needs of West Bengal is being met through the Teesta. So Teesta is seen as the lifeline of West Bengal, especially the northern parts of West Bengal. Now, to be fair, even Bangladesh has a lot of dependency. So this is where the issue has been politicized on both the sides. A lot of politics has been played over the Teesta River. Because please understand, water is a very sensitive subject. It's an emotive subject. You can easily trigger the emotions of people by politicizing water. Now, within India, we have states that are fighting against each other with regard to sharing of interstate rivers. Look at the Kaveri River dispute, how it triggers emotions in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, right? How it leads to riots and clashes within the country. Now imagine what will happen between two countries if the issue of water is politicized. The same thing has happened with the Teesta. In Bangladesh, securing enough supply of Teesta water is a very big political issue, and the very survival of Sheikh Hasina's government is dependent on it. If Sheikh Hasina has to retain her support, who is a great friend of India, if she has to win further elections, she has to find a solution for this, or else opposition parties, pro-Pakistan outfits, radical elements will target her for supporting India. In India as well, in West Bengal especially, at the state level, at the regional level, the issue has been heavily politicized. And all the parties are responsible. They are to be blamed for this. Be it Trinamool Congress, the CPI, be it BJP, the Indian National Congress. All the major parties at the state level, they have politicized the issue because it is a vote bank for political outfits. It has become a major electoral subject as political parties have unnecessarily created a controversy. See, to be neutral, it would be fair for both India and Bangladesh to work out a neutral settlement to provide for fair and equitable sharing of these waters. Yes, in India, West Bengal, the people of West Bengal are dependent on it. Similarly, people of Bangladesh are also dependent on it. So a fair and equitable sharing is what is needed. All right. Now, the government of India has finalized an agreement. It's not that we don't have a deal. We have a final agreement which has been worked out. After Sheikh Hasina came to power and after she tackled all the security problems of India, right? She expected India would deliver a return favor. So then Manmohan Singh government had worked out a final agreement. But because of the politics played in West Bengal, Manmohan Singh government couldn't go ahead with the deal. Because the then Manmohan Singh government, the UPA government, was a coalition government supported by Trinamool Congress and the left parties. So in West Bengal, they threatened to quit. They threatened to quit the central government, which would have led to the fall of the Manmohan Singh government. Even the other parties, national parties, have the same behavior. Even BJP and Congress have the same behavior. Since it has become a big electoral issue, a vote bank issue, all the parties at the state level have politicized it. That is why even the Modi government has hesitated to sign this agreement. Right? If Manmohan Singh government didn't have the support, right, Modi government could have gone ahead. But even the current government hasn't gone ahead because at the state level, even BJP, even the Congress, the Trinamool Congress, the CPI, they're all interested in politicizing the issue to garner votes. It has become an electoral issue. So even the current Modi government, even though it has enough numbers, right, it hasn't gone ahead with the deal. The agreement is ready. The terms of sharing is ready, which is that is why Sheikh Hasina is not happy with India. Bangladesh is naturally angry and upset with India because from many years we have delayed this agreement. Is that clear? Even recently, when Sheikh Hasina came to India, she jokingly said that if Teesta issue is not finalized by the Modi government, Bangladesh will retaliate by banning the export of Hilsa fish. It was a joking reference because if Hilsa export is banned, it will derail Bengali cuisine, Bengali diet. Hilsa is a critical part of Bengali diet. So Sheikh Hasina said, we'll not send you Hilsa fish anymore if you don't sign Teesta agreement. Right? But of course, even though it was a joking reference, it shows the seriousness behind it. So this remains a standing dispute. It's an unresolved dispute. Is that clear? So please pay attention to this topic. There might be developments in the coming days. All right? It's an unresolved dispute. In fact, all the disputes I'm mentioning here, they're all unresolved. Next, Tipai Mukh Dam. This is a proposed dam of India on the Barak River. Please look at the map. Barak is a major river in the northeast region. It flows through multiple northeastern states, including parts of Assam, Nagaland, etc. And it crosses over into Bangladesh. Is that clear? So the Barak flows into Bangladesh, and India has built a national waterway, and we have proposed a dam right before the border known as Tipai Mukh. Right before the Bangladeshi border, India has proposed a dam. So obviously, Bangladesh has opposed the construction of the dam because Bangladesh is worried it might affect water flow and water availability in the downstream area. Bangladesh is worried that it may not get enough water for drinking, irrigation, for maintaining the fisheries, and also to maintain the ecological flow. Right? It could affect navigation as well. So Bangladesh has genuine concerns, but India feels the dam is necessary to meet our demands. So this remains another controversial dispute, a standing dispute. Got it? Now, related to this is the Kushiara dispute. The Kushiara dispute. This is the dispute we recently resolved by signing a historic water sharing agreement. This is one positive news with regard to water sharing between the two countries. During the recent visit of Sheikh Hasina to India, sharing of Kushiara waters has been resolved. See, the Barak River, after it enters Bangladesh, it branches into two rivers. These are the distributaries. You can see that in the map. The Barak breaks into Surma and Kushiara. These are the two branches. And the Kushiara waters are important for India, important for Bangladesh as well. In Bangladesh, this is a region where rice is cultivated, where fish is harvested. So the farmers here are heavily dependent on the waters of Kushiara. But the problem was that during summer season, since India uses most of the water, it leads to shortage on Bangladeshi side. During rainy season, since India releases all the excess water, it causes floods in Bangladesh. So this has become a constant problem. Bangladesh has faced droughts and floods depending on how India uses the waters of the Kushiara. So to resolve this issue, we have signed a water sharing agreement that provides for a fair distribution to both the countries. Is that clear? So please note down this recent development. During recent visit of Sheikh Hasina to India, the Kushiara water sharing dispute has been resolved by signing this water sharing agreement. It provides for a fair distribution between both the sides without affecting Indian interests while protecting Bangladeshi interests. That is one positive development. Next, the Feni dispute. Feni is another major river in northeast India. It flows from Tripura into Bangladesh. It flows down from Tripura into Bangladesh. Is that clear? So Tripura is heavily dependent on the Feni river. But on the Feni, India has planned many projects. On the Feni river, we have planned few drinking water projects. We have planned few minor dams and irrigation projects as well. And we have also planned many water management projects at a commercial industrial town known as Sabroom. Sabroom is a major commercial center in Tripura. It's located very close to the Bangladeshi border. All right, it's an industrial center as well. There are many industries present. So India has a very grand plan to turn Sabroom into an industrial hub for the entire region, which can connect with Southeast Asian markets. Under the Look East Act East policy, India has a grand vision to develop Sabroom, which is a commercial industrial center in Tripura, and turn it into a major industrial cluster which will drive growth for the Northeast region. All right, we want to bring investments from Southeast Asia. We want to send the products from here to Southeast Asia. So to construct and set up such an industrial center and to turn it into a major hub, water is a basic requirement. So India has planned many projects for drinking water, for industrial usage, for irrigation, for inland navigation. So all these projects have raised concern in Bangladesh because India will utilize most of the waters. It might affect the flow in the downstream region. So Bangladesh wants clarity on this, and it is pushing India for a water sharing agreement for the Feni River. Is that clear? So India prioritizes this project. We want to connect Sabroom with Chittagong so that directly from Bay of Bengal, right, from the Indian Ocean, we can supply raw materials and goods via Bangladesh, via Chittagong port into Sabroom by using the inland navigation route. If Sabroom becomes an industrial cluster, right, it will drive the development of Northeast region. It will bring Northeast region closer to Southeast Asian markets. But water supply has become a problem, and the projects India has planned on the Feni has been opposed by Bangladesh. So this is another unresolved standing dispute. This is an unresolved dispute, just like Ipaimuk Dam and the Teesta. All these are unresolved water disputes between the two countries. Only the Kushiara dispute that we recently resolved by signing a water sharing agreement. Coming to the last topic, the Farakka barrage dispute. The Farakka barrage dispute is related to the sharing of the waters of the Ganga. It's part of the Ganga basin, and it's related to the Hooghly River as well. So first, let's see where Farakka barrage is located. A barrage is like a dam-like structure which holds water, right? It's a water management project. So the Farakka barrage has been built by India over here in West Bengal. It essentially diverts part of the Ganga river. The fast-flowing Ganga waters are diverted into the Hooghly. All right. Now, this diversion is crucial for India to maintain port operations at Kolkata Haldia port. Kolkata Haldia ports, they are major ports of India, strategic ports of India. But the problem is the port operations here are affected by the silt deposition, the sediment deposition. During the dry season, the Hooghly River becomes dry. There isn't enough water flow. And all the sediments that were brought in, they would have collected near the port, near the opening, where the river drains into Bay of Bengal. The problem is silt deposition will affect the movement of ships. Correct? So to make the channels open near the port and allow large ships to navigate, we have to carry out dredging. We have to manually remove the silt and sediments. But dredging is very complicated exercise. It is expensive. It is also known to damage the environment. So instead of manually dredging the silt and deposits, what India has done is that we have built Farakka barrage. We divert the perennial waters of the Ganga, the fast flowing Ganga, where the supply is present throughout the year. Part of it is diverted into the Hooghly, and these fast flowing waters will flush out the sediments. They will naturally throw out the sediments into Bay of Bengal, thus paving the way for smooth port operations at Kolkata Haldia port. So for India, Farakka barrage is critical to maintain the operationality of Kolkata Haldia port. The waters are also used for drinking purposes, for hydropower generation, and for irrigation and fisheries. So it's a multi-purpose project. So this project has been covered under the 1996 treaty. Remember, we discussed the Ganga Water Sharing Treaty. I had mentioned this treaty that was signed in 96 when Sheikh Hasina came to power for the first time. But problem is Bangladesh is not happy with the terms of the treaty. Bangladesh has major concerns here that since India is diverting the waters of the Ganga, it has affected the flow inside Bangladesh that harms agriculture in the country. Paddy cultivation, which is a lifeline for Bangladesh, even jute cultivation, this has been compromised because India has diverted part of the Ganga River towards the Hooghly, right? And since India utilizes most of these waters for other purposes like drinking, irrigation, etc., Bangladesh is left with very little supply, and its biggest complaint is that agriculture is getting affected. Even fisheries are getting affected. The environment is getting affected. So that is why Bangladesh wants a renegotiation. It wants the Ganga Water Sharing Treaty to be revised and updated to account for the impact of Farakka barrage on Bangladesh. But India is not willing to negotiate, as Farakka barrage is critical for India, for not just the Kolkata Haldia port, but also for the people of the region. So this remains another unresolved dispute. It remains a standing dispute which continues to affect India-Bangladesh relations. Is that clear? So these are the major river disputes that you should be aware of with regard to India-Bangladesh relations. On this note, I would like to conclude my discussion for today. Let's look at some questions and doubts that you have, and after that we can close the session. Tomorrow when we meet, we'll start with the next module. We'll look at our relations with Myanmar. We will study India-Myanmar relations. But for today, it's enough. Let's look at the doubts and questions that are pending. Syed is asking why China is interested in Bangladesh. There are several reasons. Bangladesh is an Indian Ocean country, right? It opens to Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. And Bangladesh has plenty of resources. And it's a neighbor of India. So obviously China would be interested, mainly because of Bangladesh strategic location. Deepshika is asking why Bangladesh didn't refuse to join the Belt and Road Initiative. Because see, all these countries which have joined the Belt and Road Initiative of China, they see a lot of benefits. Because by being part of the Belt and Road Initiative, they will get easy funds, easy investments. China is providing very attractive concessional loans, right? through which they can finance key infrastructure projects. So all our neighboring countries, except for Bhutan, all of them have joined Belt and Road Initiative. Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. All the neighboring countries of India are part of Belt and Road Initiative of China, except for Bhutan. India has boycotted Belt and Road Initiative for a particular reason. I'll explain that later when we come to India, Pakistan, and India, China. There I will explain the reason why India has boycotted Belt and Road Initiative. Bhutan, since it follows India in its foreign policy, right? By and large, Bhutan follows India's foreign policy. So Bhutan also has not joined Belt and Road Initiative. But other than that, every other neighboring country has joined the BRI because they see a lot of benefits. They will get easy investments, easy access to capital, which will drive infrastructure projects in their country. Bal Raju is asking, do we need visa to go from Northeast India to Bangladesh? Yes. For transit between India to Bangladesh, there is a visa requirement. Amit is asking, okay, last question. Amit is asking, sir, if the agreement between USSR and India helped India during the 71 war, then why India didn't support Russia during the Ukraine war? See, first of all, don't make a direct comparison between the 71 war and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. It's like comparing apples and oranges. And moreover, India has backed Russia, at least indirectly, right? At all the UN votes, we have abstained from voting against Russia. We have bypassed Western sanctions. We continue to import Russian oil, and we continue our defense trade as well with Russia by bypassing Western sanctions. So in many ways, India has backed the Russian war, right? Directly or indirectly. All right. So guys, these were the questions. Let's end the session for today. We'll catch up tomorrow. We'll start with the next module and we'll take up India's relations with Myanmar. So that is it from my side. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. And yeah, don't forget, you have a session at 8:30 by Sarbat sir. So please join the session at 8:30.